Patrick.
Hey, Shayla, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I am good. I'm good.
Awesome.
Busy, uh, but busy is good.
Busy is good. How's the family? How's the baby? Probably
They
not a
are
baby
good.
now.
She's still a baby, but acting less like one it feels like every single day. Uh,
Love it. Oh,
she's
that's
good
awesome.
though. She's
Good.
just turned 1 in December, so she's she's doing great.
Awesome. Good deal. And I'm sure the wifey's good as well. That's awesome.
She is. Yes.
Good. Awesome. Awesome.
Things good with you?
Yeah, I can't complain. Staying busy. Yeah, I can't complain. Honestly, it's been very good. Been the year have started off pretty good and solid. So I'm excited to see what the rest of the year is gonna bring. But yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
Yep,
Nice.
yep, yep. Hello there, Christine.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing? Are you one of our attendees?
I am, yes.
Great. Well, we'll give it a little bit. I'll share my screen here. Okay, Patrick, I'm gonna unhide those.
Just remember that. Yep.
Let me unhide them real quick before I share my screen. And then I think it's towards the end. Hello there. Welcome, welcome. All right, let me find them. Oh, well, I probably need to go into. Okay, here we go. So what I did, Patrick, is I took both of them for this session and just combined them and
Okay.
put like breaks in between. So like I'll know when to break and things of that sort. So, okay.
Love it. That is awesome. Yeah, whatever works best for you works for me.
Perfect. And so the question I have, knowledge item one, a company have struggled to reach revenue projections for several consecutive quarters.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm gonna shoot you a quick.
So they look like, okay, three questions. Okay, cool, cool,
Okay.
cool.
Yep, there should be, let's see.
Maybe more, wait a minute. This is probably for that section. Maybe there's more. Let me go back up.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me go towards the first one. It's the first subject I'm covering. Okay. Let's see. Now, a couple of these slides I had to hide because there was no content on them. Is that
Okay.
okay? Yep. So, and I'll
Yeah.
let them know, like, hey, study for that on your own. It's only
Yep.
like a couple, like differential pay is one that didn't have any content.
Okay.
And I'm just
Yeah.
assuming, as you and I know, we've been doing this a long time, probably the way it was downloaded to the platform
Yes.
when you
Yes.
all received it. Yeah.
Yep. That's weird, but yeah, I think that that's probably the case. Just a formatting thing.
Yeah. So let's see. Let's see. Okay, yes. Okay, so knowledge one for structure HR. This one starts, which of the following HR responsibilities are an example of an HR administrative role? Okay, so yeah, there's three questions for that one and then three for the second part. Okay.
Yep. I am getting ready. I'll shoot you a text with the answers.
Okay, that works. And we'll get started here, you all, in about another minute. I know some people probably need to just log on. So if it's okay with you, if you want to go grab something or what have you, we got a minute or two.
And then there are the total rewards answers. So just from one, two, and three,
Okay.
I shot you a text of the
Yep.
answers there. So
Yep. Got it. Cool.
nice.
Perfect. Perfect. Hello there. Welcome. I'll give it another minute or so and we'll jump into this. Oh,
Do you remember me, Shayla?
I do. How are you, Donna? How are
Hi,
you doing?
how are you?
Good. I can't complain.
Good
Can't
to see. Oh, sorry, my dog. Good to see you.
you too. Likewise. I had to just put my dog up because he likes to act up when I get on Zoom and
Your
phone
baby.
calls.
Yeah.
He act like he has to go outside or he wants to play with a toy. And I'm like, no, not this evening, buddy.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll
Well,
get.
I'm no longer with that company we worked together at that you hired me for. So
Oh, I did hire you. It was awesome. It's cool. Wow. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that, but I definitely
No, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry.
it's
That
all
was
good.
a
Uh-huh.
very intentional goodbye on my part.
Yep.
So
Yep.
no issue.
I'm sure you're happy. I mean, we both
I am very happy.
we know the culture, right? We know the
Yep.
culture. So
Very low key job right now.
mhm.
Um, happy, good work life balance. So
That's what it's about. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yes.
yeah,
It's
good to
always
see you.
you too. It's always good to come across people either I worked with or people I hired.
Yeah,
So it's always
yeah,
cool. So I'm glad. It's really about that, for me at this time in this in life, it's kind of like that peace and that balance and harmony. And we already have life.
absolutely.
Yeah, life be life, and we don't want to have to add any extra stress to it. So
No, absolutely.
perfect. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm gonna share my screen. Welcome everyone. I'm gonna pull this over here and then we will get started. And I'll kind of tell you how this evening's gonna go. I'm really excited. Patrick Nim can contest that I get excited this time of year. I reach out to Patrick, even though I know he's gonna reach out to me. I reach out to him first, and I'm like, "Hey, you need some facilitators?" Because I want to volunteer my time again. So it's always a pleasure to be with you all. So welcome, welcome, welcome. So I'm Shay Dupree. I'm your host or facilitator for the evening. And so for this evening, what we're going to basically do is I have combined both sections, right? So we're going to cover structure of HR as well as total rewards. So I'll combine them both, but we're going to take integral breaks throughout because it's a lot of content, okay? So this is a safe space, jump in, ask questions. I'll keep an eye on the chat a little bit, but yeah, raise your hand or come off mute if you have a question. It's okay. It's not, you don't have to wait till the end because I'm sure you're going to have questions throughout. And we're just going to, make it engaging, have a little fun with it, and, ask me any questions and we learn from each other because it's always a good time for me as well. If you need to step away, go to the bathroom, check on whatever, feel free, just cut your camera off, mute yourself, and just do whatever you have to do. And I'm totally okay with that. So before we get started, any questions for me? And I'll turn it over to Patrick, see if Patrick have anything before I get started.
Sorry, I abruptly logged off. My computer died. Doesn't happen often, but I do not have anything. I guess I'll give you a quick intro, Shayla. Appreciate you being here tonight. So, our facilitator tonight will be Shayla Dupree. Shayla and I would say, go way back from from the certification committee specifically, is where we first met. She was on the committee, and so was I. Um, and she also is a committee member by passing the exam from taking this course. So, um, she has gone on to bigger and better things since then, but have always asked her to facilitate one or two sessions a year, um, because she knows the material as well as any of the other facilitators. So I'm super appreciative of her time tonight, and know that, like all other facilitators, you'll get some great study tips from Shayla, and also, if I remember correctly, some pretty hilarious and also terrifying test situations as well. So
Yep.
be on the lookout for those, and I hope and pray that none of those happen to you. Although Shayla held it up like a champ and obviously got certified regardless. So. Um, Again, appreciate your time tonight, Shayla, and hope that everyone enjoys the session. Um, and as a general reminder, if you have not already, schedule your exam. I just gotta say it. So if you haven't scheduled your exam already, make sure that you are going ahead and doing that. And then final update. I have misspoken early on in the group when I mentioned that there is a remote testing option. SHRM has done away with that, apparently. They mentioned that for some reason it is no longer a secure option. So in-person testing, if you've scheduled your exam already, you've likely found out that that is the only route that you can take to schedule your exam. So apologies for getting your hopes up if you are a remote test taker, but know that you'll do just fine with that in-person option. So wanted to get that out there since I had seen it. It was weighing on me since I had mentioned it to you all. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. Other than that, I've got nothing else. I will turn it over to Shayla. And if there are any questions for me, feel free to reach out. I'll keep an eye on the chat. I will likely log out, but I can keep an eye on the chat on my phone while Shayla is doing her thing. So thanks everyone for being here, and thank you, Shayla.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, me and Patrick go way back. He is one of my many, very few favorite HR people. He's just always so awesome and always consistent. And so he knows I get so excited. So I'm excited to be here with you all. First and foremost, just take a deep breath. We're going to have some fun and learn. I love to learn, and I'm just excited to be here. So I'm going to go through the slides. We have a lot to cover. So I do not read word for word, and that's by design, only because I try to give you practical application when we're covering the content. Okay, so feel free, like I said, take yourself off mute, ask questions. But there are a few slides that me and Patrick were talking about early on that doesn't have any content just because it was downloaded to the facilitator portal. I'll say, hey, here's one of those slides that you study on your own. But ask questions. We got a lot to cover. We'll take some breaks. And then, of course, I'll be back with you again next week, to facilitate a different subject matter. And then at the end, I'm going to ask you for some feedback, since I will see you all next week, what will be helpful for you, what you want me to do more of, not enough of, what have you. I'm always open to constructive feedback, so no worries there. So we'll jump into this. I'm glad you all are here. But before I do that, just kind of, take yourself off mute a little bit and just tell me your name, which I can see, but tell me your name, tell me a little bit about you. Are you working in between, opportunities? Are you, what are you looking to do with your HR? How long you've been in HR and all that good stuff? Who wants to kick us off?
I'll kick us off.
Okay. Hi.
I'm Lori Martin. I work I'm here in Lebanon, Indiana. Work for a very small sheet metal facility, union facility. I'm a little department of one HR. It's a company that's never had HR until I came along, and now they're trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing, and it's up to me to figure it out. So that's where I'm here. So and
Welcome. Oh, we got some good fun. It's okay. You're in the right group. Honestly, you're surrounded by the right people, so it's okay. Know what that's like as well. But welcome, and you're going to be just fine either way. So glad you're here.
It's great because I said at the beginning I didn't even know about Indy SHRM or about the study group or anything. I've been actually trying to study on my own for almost a year and not feeling prepared at all to sit down to do this exam. And then friends of mine who are in HR are like, you need to get into a study group.
Yes.
Like, oh, well, what's that?
What's that look like? No, that's awesome. They brought you to the right place. So that's awesome. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Right. Cool. Who's next?
I can go.
Okay.
So my name is Andrea. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Andrea. I've been in the HR field for about 4 years, and as an HR generalist as my main function. And right now I am in between jobs. I am looking at opportunities where I can leverage my skills and also what I'm learning here. So I'm seeking a position where I can use more of the strategy instead of like the administrative tasks. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I really enjoy the classes. So.
Awesome. Welcome, Andrea. Glad to have you. All right,
Thank
cool.
you.
Who wants to go next?
I can go.
Okay.
Shayla and I know each other. Shayla, I'm Donna. And I've been in HR a really long time, but I've joined a company that wanted me to go through this process and get my certification. So at 58 years old, I decided that I didn't really have a choice if I wanted this job. So now I'm in it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm struggling. It's a lot of content, it's a lot of information. It is a different way to think. The whole strategy piece of it is different. I grew up in the world where HR was more paperwork, processing, all that, and then started to see the change in the cultures of companies wanting HR to be more of a business partner. But it's not that I've worked in that environment a lot. So I'm struggling with some of this because it's conceptually in my head, but I've not had to work with it a lot. So to me, I'm like old HR versus kind of the new HR, and it's a little difficult for me.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that, Donna, and definitely, we can provide me, Patrick, and others can provide you kind of how to shift. Of course, as you and I know, many people have taken this course that would either new or kind of, been in HR, and it is hard. It is. You have to begin to think like SHRM. They call it that SHRM think, right? Being able to kind of switch on how they view it versus how we were taught before you went through the certification. So I definitely can register with that. So hopefully we can kind of get you on the right path where you kind of just take all that out and say, okay, how is it that SHRM want me to answer? And that's really what this study group does for you. It helps you to think like SHRM so that you can pass the exam. So yeah, we'll talk about that, and whatever advice I can give all of you, we can talk about that as well. But you'll be
Appreciate it.
fine. Yeah. And yes,
Thank
me and
you.
Donna, I actually hired Donna for a corporation some years back. She and I worked together. I interviewed her along other many benefit specialists and consultant, and Donna is the one that ended up with the job. And I wanted to pay her, and I remember the interview. It was awesome, and she was like, "Oh, I don't need that much." I'm like, "No, no, no. This is the salary. Remember that, Donna?" I'm like, "This is the salary I want to give you." She was willing to take less than, and I'm like, "No, your experience. I want to give you this." And I remember Donna was like, "Are you serious?" I'm like,
Okay.
so that's just awesome, but it's just really good because you're worth it. You know what I mean? When you've paid your way and you've spent time in this industry, you want to run across people when they interview you to value you in terms of compensation. So it's all good. But yes, welcome back, Donna. Okay,
Thank you.
Christine, you're welcome. How about you? Tell us about you, Christine.
I'm Christine, and I've been in HR for like 4 years at a trucking company. But it has been mostly administration, payroll, and benefits. And so kind of like Donna, it has been quite the switch for me to be like, okay, yep, yes, there is some memorization, but I also have to apply it. And this is my third time taking the exam, so I have very well learned that, and I'm very excited for this group and people learning.
Awesome. Well, welcome back. And it's okay, at the end, and it really is. And I don't just say anything just to be saying it. I'm really true to form. It's tough. It's not, if everyone could get this exam, everyone would have it. So let's just be honest about that. It is not an easy exam, but it can be done. The best study tips I can give you all as we about to jump into this content is what helped me and my group is that we did study together. I studied on my own. I did not stay away from it longer than a day. I had to literally commit to it on top of managing life, managing some family members that were going through a sickness, dealing with my own challenges in my job at the time. Like I literally had to study this stuff like I ate food. So let me first say, if you stay away from it longer than a day or so, depending on the person, you will forget it because it's so much information. And what I had to do at that time when I took it, I had already been in HR probably going on 10 years. So I had to literally study with my study group, and we kept each other accountable. And we said, okay, this is how we would answer in everyday life, but what would SHRM say? Well, how would SHRM want us to answer? Because these questions are written by SHRM professionals that sat where you and I are. They just happen to be doing this a long time. And so I too had to sit there and read the questions. I had to reread the questions, and I had to say, okay, this is how I would do it in everyday life, but this is not what SHRM is asking me to do. So that is one thing I can preface you is that before you answer the questions and you study, and I do recommend taking the exam. I do recommend taking the free exam, the starter exam at the beginning in your platform, and then take it again at the end of the course just to kind of see how you've kind of graduated through the information. But don't be discouraged. Some of those exams that I was taking, I was not passing them. I had to take them over and take them again because it's the wording, it's the conceptualization that they want you to get down in the concept. But it can be done. So no worries there. Well, just a little bit about me. Been in HR, made 18 years this past February. So I'm a consultant. I run my own small consulting and coaching business. So I've been doing that. Actually, I registered my business back in 2018, I think, and I didn't do anything with it till around 2020. And then these last 3 years, I've just kind of went full force with consulting and coaching. So I have contracts. I'm working through government contracting now. I have contracts with other companies where I either do executive coaching, or I do training development, and I do speaking engagements. So just a little bit about me. And then I wrote a book about a year ago. So I wrote that book, and it's basically just to help people kind of, interview and things of that sort. But this is just a little bit about me. I'm also, certified life coach, executive coach, and Myers and Briggs and all that. And again, different companies of mine want different things. And so I too, again, sat where you sat, and I will share with you that example that Patrick's talking about. I don't want to scare you now, but I'll wait till we're done here. And it's a good story. It's a positive story. It just started off a little rocky, but we'll definitely jump into that. So let's talk about some HR structure. Let's talk about HR for a little bit. We know that HR basically is an umbrella, right? We have to be able to align HR strategy with the organizational strategy. We know that every business is in business to do one thing, and that's to make money, okay? It doesn't matter what industry sector. Most companies are in business to make money. We know that nonprofit is about the mission and the people, but they still have to make money. We know that public and private sectors, even the government is a business, okay? So everyone is in business, but we have to understand that the HR structure starts with that alignment, participating and creating that organizational strategy, and then looking for those support functions to be able to fulfill those strategic roles. And so that is the foundation of what you and I do, is understanding what our role is as HR and how it contributes to the organizational strategy. We know that HR can be both tactical, operational, and administrative, okay? From an administrative standpoint, most of us started out that way. At least I did with the HR internship. I'm like, okay, they just have me filling out I-9s. Like, is this all I'm gonna do? But it was the administrative side of things. I was learning, getting my boots, laced up, as they call it. But the administrative side is being able to utilize technology, capture and analyze that data, right, to reduce transactional time, basically focusing on those capabilities. And then the other side of HR is the operational. That's kind of where we get more into the high level strategic, that knowledge management, that talent acquisition and development, and looking at incentive systems like total rewards, and then looking at employee engagement programs, because that's so important. In today's current and climate where we have AI and we also have the lack of engagement, companies really do have to continue to focus on that employee engagement aspect, because there's so many people out there that are looking for jobs, but a lot of companies are kind of overanalyzing this hiring process. They're running through it quick. They're not really trying to find the right candidate, and they're just kind of, they're getting flooded, because I see it in the companies I go into, and they're lacking employee engagement. So it's so important that from an operational standpoint that we focus on both TA, talent and acquisition, our incentive systems, as well as our employee engagement and having that knowledge management. As I walk through these slides, I'm going to kind of point out to you things. I may say, hey, you might want to know this. And that is your cue to kind of put an asterisk or take notes. All of this stuff is important, but there's some that kind of stands out for me more than others that you might want to spend your time studying, just because over the years of facilitating this, a lot of people struggle with some topics more than others. But when we try to look at executive management, we know executive management is kind of that high level leadership, and that consists of many different things. And so it's going to be HR people, it's going to be marketing and sales people, it's going to be the finance and accounting, it's going to be research and development, it's going to be operations, and it's also going to be information technology. All of these departments are important. I have always told people that there's two people you do not want to burn bridges with. That is your CFO and your IT person. Those two people are so important, because when you kind of think about that, CFO is that these individuals will find money when there isn't money, and then IT is they're going to support that infrastructure of an organization. And that's so important. And actually, when you kind of think about it, you're like, I need IT to be able to support anything. If you want to roll out a new program, if you want to purchase a new HRIS system, IT is where they come in. And now all the departments are important. But for me as an HR person, I always felt like the CFO is the person that got the money, and the IT person is the person that's going to keep me working and have my computer and the infrastructure to support whatever it is the organization is trying to do from an organizational standpoint. So this is a synopsis of what the executive management looks like. So we know the C-suite, those wonderful individuals that sit at the C-suite, right? And we know that they're ultimately responsible for the core business and functions of an organization and its performance. And so we have the C-suite, high-level executive leadership, and they are designed to develop and communicate, monitor and control implementation, and be strategic and operational. They primarily focus on the interface of the organization and their stakeholders. And their job as a C-suite individuals is to lead the organization through a shared vision that contributes to the values of the organization and the model that they stand for. So we know that those C-suite individuals make a lot of money, but yet and still they are designed and equipped to do a whole lot of things, right? And they're responsible for making sure that organization go from A to B, from B to C, and so on. When you look at the finance and accounting, just understanding, hey, it supports operations. We know finance and accounting are two totally different departments, but their goal is to basically provide that financial analysis, right, from a strategic planning standpoint, because every organization does do strategic planning. Some organizations also contribute that with workforce planning, and they take that sometimes 1 to 2, 3 years out when they talk about financial. That's why when you see organizations that do mass layoffs, that is not something that's done in isolation. It is not a overnight thing. It's not even a 3 to 4 month thing. It happens well in advance before anybody ever knows, because they're doing what we call strategic planning. And then from a financial standpoint, they manage the organization's treasury, the money, right? And then when you kind of look at accounting, they're focusing on kind of tracking those financial applications, accounts payable, accounts receivable. They're reporting information. They're making sure the lights are on. They're making sure vendors get paid. They're making sure procurement services is taken care of. And they're making sure that they're giving this financial information snapshot to the stakeholders so that they can be aware of how the organization is functioning, right? So again, financial and accounting is two totally different departments, but they both play an intricate role in the organizational success. So when you talk about bringing in revenue, okay, we talk about bringing revenue, may separate these functions all together. And again, this is one slide that's missing some information. So here I say to you, make sure that you write down sales strategy so you can study that on your own. Because again, some of the slides are missing some information. But from a marketing standpoint, we know that there's a push and pull. Here's what you do need to remember. You might want to remember push and pull. Understand the difference between push and pull, okay? Push and pull strategies. That is something you may want to know for future reference. Push and pull strategies. The marketing strategies are often referred to as push and pull, where you push, get the products and services in front of the customers. And then the pull strategy is attracting customers to that product. And again, most companies don't have a sales problem. They have a marketing problem because they have to market the products, right? Think of a small business. If any of you know of someone that's starting their own business or trying to sell on Etsy or sell on Amazon, and they're like, I'm having a hard time getting customers. One thing as an entrepreneur, most people struggle with having a marketing problem, not a sales problem. Because again, push and pull says, hey, you got to push, you got to get the products out in front of the customers, and then you have to find a way to pull them in by attracting them. So if you ever run into that family member or that friend that says, hey, I'm not making sales, say to them, you sure you don't have a marketing problem? You may have a marketing problem and not really a sales problem, okay? And we'll take a break here in a second. When we talk about wanting to generate revenue, we know that it's important, okay? Because every company, research and development is how they start to get that new product out there in front of people. And then we have to look at it where they have to conduct what we call a centralized manner, for example, that globalized strategy that talks about implementation and business units so that the products stay focused on what the customer needs. Because again, if we don't serve our customers, someone else will. And that's why companies have to spend time on their research and development. And then they have to focus on that push and pull factor to make sure they get the product in front of the customers, and then they pull the customers in by getting them to purchase. One of the things that we have to continue to focus on is we think about operational and IT. That is so important when we talk about operations and IT. Operations is more or less looking at the development of produces and those products and how you distribute those services, being concerned with efficiency and how you use it and the resources and the quality of it, and then looking at how complex it is when it comes to operations. And again, here go that word again, IT. People, a lot of people don't realize how important IT is when it comes to an organization. integration when it comes to an HR department. You know, if you're looking at a company that is struggling with, you know, their HRI system or is outdated, or they don't know how to track performance management, I often ask them, what type of HRI system are you using? And they say, oh, you know, we probably need to update it, or we probably need to buy more applications for it. The first thing I have to ask them is, do you have the IT infrastructure to support it? Because IT is going to manage, it's going to store and give access in terms of the interface of the organization to be able to collect that data through organizational means. And so the hardware and the software of a system is so important when you talk about a company, especially if it's a company that's growing, if they have an expectation that they're going to grow, you know, over the next 2 to 5 years, making sure that you have the right IT infrastructure to support that integration across all the enterprises through the ERPs, as we call them, and being able to not only maintain that information, but make sure it's reliable data. And so a lot of people may not understand the importance of an IT infrastructure when we talk about operations and IT. So I'm going to pause right there. How are you all feeling? Questions or comments do you have? You want me to keep going, or you want to take a break?
I'm good with if you keep going. Sorry, I can't talk.
Okay, it's okay. So I'll go through probably another 5 or 6 slides. And then actually at the end of this, we're going to have some questions. And so we can take a break then. So that is what we're going to do. So let's talk a little bit about, again, we're still focusing on the HR structure, right? HR team. So I heard some of you say you're generalists. Some of you have been managers and HR business partners and leaders. But all of these intricate parts deliver what we call HR services. Here's the interesting part about today's current climate. You will have different interchangeable names when it comes to HR. Some people are considered HR business partners. Now they're calling them people pleasers. My goodness. They're
That too.
That people pleasers. They're calling them people managers and stuff. And you're right, Donna, that too. But yeah, many different terms, right, when it comes to HR individuals such as ourselves. So depending on the organization, they're going to use different terms. So you may see HR manager, people manager be used interchangeably. Again, I always try to look at when I coach and mentor people, hey, look at whether it's exempt or non-exempt. That's what kind of tells me, because we know that if it's non-exempt, we know that it's going to be limited in terms of what you're responsible for. But any of these positions, if it's exempt, you can best believe it's going to have a lot of responsibility to go along with it. But leaders, managers, specialists, and generalists and HR business partner all make up the delivery of HR. But if I had to ask you all, what do you think is the difference between a leader and a manager? Anybody? What are your thoughts?
Say the leader and would be more of the chief officer
Okay.
of the department, if you're going to go by titling, and then manager. But
Okay. Love that comment. Anybody else? What are your thoughts between a leader and a manager?
Maybe the leader is focusing more on motivating their employees
Okay.
than managers.
Okay. No wrong answers. I'm just curious. Anybody else? Okay. Well, here's my thought about leaders and managers. So my thought is, depending on who you ask, but for me, I believe that every individual has the ability to lead from where they sit and stand. If we had to go by titles, then yes, the people that sit at the C-suite would be considered a leader. But I also am a firm believer that me as an HR generalist, when I was just an HR generalist, I thought I was a leader as well. I just didn't have the title or the income, right? So when you think about leading and managing, think of it from that standpoint, okay? And SHRM says, hey, listen, leaders are the individuals that have the ability to lead, and then managing are those managers that manage those tasks and manage people. Because believe it or not, the best asset a company has is their human capital. That's the best asset any company has. It doesn't matter to me what their industry. It doesn't matter if it's hospitality, trucking, logistics, manufacturing. It doesn't matter if it's a private equity firm, if it's a public traded company. The best asset any company has is their human capital. And managers are the ones that are managing the everyday tasks, and then they're managing employees as well. And the leaders are also managing managers as well, but they're leading the organization, right, towards that vision and that goal and that particular business model. And then specialists generalists are those ones that specialize in things. So you may have someone that's a benefits specialist. That means they just kind of focus on benefits, or maybe they're a talent acquisition specialist. They're just strictly focusing on TNA. So you have those specialists. I was a generalist. I have never been a specialist. A generalist kind of encompasses everything. That means they can do everything. They're supposed to anyway. They're supposed to do the payroll, the hiring, the onboarding, the termination letter, the offer letter. They do, you know, new hire orientation, benefits orientation during open enrollment. You know, they answer phone calls, they interview people, they terminate people. HR generalists can do a lot, right? And then an HR business partner, depending on the organization, may do all of that. May end up doing all of that, or they may just focus on one particular function of HR. They may be an HR business partner for total rewards, or an HR business partner for benefits, or an HR business partner that's strictly focused on TNA. So just understanding that although some of these terms are used interchangeably, understanding them from a SHRM standpoint, how SHRM desensifies leaders, managers, specialists, HR generalists, and HR business partners. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay, cool. All right. So let's talk about centralized and decentralized HR, because there is a such thing. So centralized is when all the HR is in one department. And because I know this test can be overwhelming and your studying is overwhelming, I'm going to really limit it to giving you the high view of each term that we come across. And that kind of may help you study more, at least it helped me. But again, let me know your thoughts. So centralized is basically the whole HR department is located in one place. Okay. It's headquartered. Okay. This means centralized. They're making the policies, they're making the strategy decisions, and they coordinate all HR programs. Okay. They're basically making sure that everything is standardized from an HR standpoint when it comes to policies and procedures. Okay. They create efficiencies when it comes to delivery and services. So if I was studying, I had to think of what is the difference between centralized and decentralized. I know that centralized, everything is in one central place. Everything starts with this one central headquarter. It's headquartered, and it doesn't matter if the company is overseas and they have many headquarters in the United States. One of those operating within the States is going to be centralized, and the other functions or other areas in the world is going to be decentralized. And it depends on how they structure their organizational chart, because you can have many different centralized and decentralized, but there's only going to be one headquarter, and they may be headquartered overseas. So they may operate in Tennessee, Mexico, and New York. But which one of those will be centralized? It's going to be all derivative of an organizational chart. So again, if I had to think about this and study, I know that centralized HR, everything is in one place. Okay, everything starts at that headquarter. The policies and the procedures, centralized. Decentralized is that each part of the organization controls its own HR issues. And I'm going to give you an example here in a second. That means that strategy and policy may be made at the headquarters, but HR staff within each function, business unit, or location carries out their required activities. Here's a true story example. I worked in manufacturing. They were stationed overseas in Nanterre, Germany. The corporate office was in Detroit, Michigan. I worked out of the one here in Indianapolis. The centralized headquarters was in Detroit, Michigan. My location and all of the other 7 locations throughout the 50 states were decentralized, which means that each one of the locations, including mine that I worked at, we all got all of our information from the headquarters, centralized in Detroit, Michigan, but we handled our own HR issues decentralized within our own region. Did you need me to run through that again? Make sense? I'll say it one more time. The corporate office was in Nanterre, Germany. In the States, the headquarters was in Detroit, Michigan. All of our policies, how we interviewed, our interviewing documents, our benefits, everything was done at centralized headquarters in Detroit, Michigan. But when it came to HR issues, me here in Indianapolis, other locations, we handled our own HR issues. We did not go to the headquarters to handle our employee relations or our benefits. That means that we were decentralized, but everything that we did from a policy and procedure came from centralized Detroit, Michigan. You follow me? That's the difference between centralized and decentralized. So centralized means headquartered, one place. Decentralized means they're responsible for their own things other than policies and procedures. That means they're going to be responsible for their own hiring, decentralized. They're going to be responsible for their own employee relation issues. They're going to be responsible for their own union and non-union issues. Again, they have that bargaining agreement, but they're still decentralized, meaning they have to make sure they handle things at their level within their city and state, meaning I didn't have to call Detroit, Michigan to be like, how do I handle this? They left it to the regions to handle. So each part controls their own HR issues is what I'm saying. So centralized and decentralized. Does that help? Okay, cool. And then of course we have functional and dedicated. Okay, these two slides definitely you might want to study, but functional and dedicated. So functional is headquartered with HR specialists and craft policies. Okay, that means that HR generalists, for example, are located within divisions and other locales. They implement these policies, they adapt them as needed, and they interact with employees. Okay, so that is functional. Headquartered HR specialists, and they craft policies. Again, going back to my same example, we also had functional within that Detroit, Michigan as well, which means that we had specialists that crafted certain policies, and we adopted them in the location I worked in and all of the other locations. And because I was an HR generalist for this company, we basically had to implement our policies, but we adopted them from the headquarters, and we just had to make it applicable to our location. Now, because it was both union and non-union, my location was a combination of both, but my coworker that was an HR generalist in Tennessee was a non-union. So from a functional standpoint, she still had to go to corporate HR, Detroit, Michigan, to understand how to apply the same policies that they crafted to apply to a non-union environment. Where I was, it was both union and non-union. So I had to function off of both cylinders, right? So again, that's the functional piece. And then the dedicated piece is an HR function that is headquartered but separated from HR, meaning it's embedded into its business units. This can be an example where you may have someone that is an HR person, but they're basically placed at a location. So they're embedded into the company, but yet and still the corporate HR dictates and articulates what they do. So for example, that could be someone that is out of the Detroit, Michigan, but goes to a union environment. She has to, as an HR generalist, make sure that she's following the bargaining agreement when she's dealing with employee relations, but she also has to make sure that she articulates from the Detroit, Michigan location, the tools, what's happening, the HR functions, basic HR values, and make it applicable to both union and non-union. Because we both know, if you ever worked in a union environment, how you handle employee relations is not the same as you handle non-union. Totally different. So an HR generalist is operating on both cylinders, union and non-union, has to make sure from a dedicated standpoint that she takes the corporate articulate HR values and trickle it down to her location, because she's sitting in a union environment, but some of the issues may be union or non-union. She has to be able to articulate from a corporate standpoint how she's going to apply that and embed it into her location. It's a lot. So that's dedicated, okay? So again, we've already covered centralized, decentralized, functional, and dedicated, okay? I would encourage you to study those, okay? Shared services, we kind of know what shared services is, okay? This is basically where an organization has multiple business units. Some organizations tend to have a shared union. This is kind of like you call in and you got all of these individuals, benefits, talent acquisition. It's kind of like in a shared service. It's kind of like ordering, but it's a whole bunch of departments, as we know. It's shared services. It's an area of expertise of HR policies that deliver service to all of the business units, okay? Again, it's frequently used in organizations that have multiple business units. When I worked in the tech firm about a year and a half ago, 2 years in 2022, I worked at a tech firm as a VP. I was filling in for the lady that was out. They had 30 different business units. She went out on, that's when she hired me. She hired me as the senior HR manager. I filled in for her as a VP. So I had two dual roles. They had 30 different business units, but I was responsible for the entire shared services. So what that means is that all these 30 different business units called into my department, which we were a department of like 15, and basically people are calling in asking questions that's relatable to their business unit. So they would get somebody in my department, right? Shared services. So again, being responsible for multiple business units and then being able to look at a menu of shared services. So one location business unit was in New York. They would call in and say, hey, we got questions about benefits. And then there was someone else. And so my department had to track each time these 30 business units would call in. So again, that's shared services where it's multiple business units and the organization is using that kind of like in a centralized place. And then of course we have what we call Center of Excellence. This is basically aiming at leveraging strategic expertise to try to foster growth and continuous improvement. So that's the Center of Excellence. So you may find some organizations that say, hey, our HR department is a center of excellence, because what they're trying to adopt is say, hey, we're located in a certain facility, or we may be virtual, but we are trying to foster continuous growth and continuous improvement. So that is shared services, center of excellence, functional, dedicated, centralized, and decentralized. That's a lot. What questions do you have about any of that? Okay, I'll keep it moving here and then we'll take a break. Business partners, we've heard of them. We kind of talked about HR business partners. So again, that's embedded in different areas of the business, reportedly directly looking at managers that has a dotted line to HR. So again, business partners are those individuals as well that's in different parts of the business, but they have a dotted line to reporting to someone in HR. So that HR business partner may also function as a manager, right? Again, I always look at it as exempt or non-exempt. They may most of the time be functioning as a manager, but they have a dotted line to HR. And then of course, them organizations that have what we call matrix structures, okay? This means that they allow flexibility and they specialize in working relationships. Unlike business partners though, they have a reporting through HR and senior management. So that means that a person, you ever heard of someone that says they got two managers? Or they say they report to two different people? That's most likely they're in a matrix structure, which means that, take me, for example, I'm here in Indianapolis, and let's say Christine is over in Texas and Andrea's over in New York. I report to both of them. So I report to Andrea in New York and I report to Christine in Texas. And basically I'm y'all employed, but I report to both of you. But then both of you report up to someone that's head up in HR. So that's what we call a matrix structure, where a person may have two managers, but all three of them actually report up to that person that's the head of HR. So that's what we call that matrix structure. And then of course, those global resources, being able to obtain support and resources from around the world and try to figure out, how do we utilize our resources, help HR avoid any type of local issues, but increase those opportunities for miscommunication, especially when it comes to cultural norms. So have any of you ever worked overseas or worked for a global company? I'm curious to know. Anybody ever worked for a global company? Okay. Anybody ever been overseas for work? No? Okay. Always good to know. One of my biggest regret in my HR career when I was in corporate America is I never went over to Nanterre, Germany. I don't have many regrets in HR. Only regret I have is that I had an opportunity to travel overseas for 2 weeks for that manufacturing company, and I did not go. And that is the only regret that I have, because my goal was to get a global mindset, right? Which you don't have to travel overseas to get that. But it was a manufacturing and it was global and it had many different functions, as I mentioned here, Detroit, Michigan. So if you get an opportunity to travel and you feel safe to do so, I encourage you to definitely travel with a company if they're willing to send you overseas. You don't have to stay forever, right? But get that experience so that you come back to the States. But that is the only regret that I have for my HR career, is that I never had an opportunity to really travel and really get that global experience. But yeah. So let's talk about a little. Go ahead.
Sorry. Do you feel like that the test is heavy on global strategies and things of that nature?
My safe answer is it's heavy on a lot.
Yeah.
I think it has a good mixture because of the fact that our culture and climate is driven by globalization. I think it has a fair share of touching things from a global standpoint. So I say it has a fair share of all of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Y'all need a break, or you want me to keep going? You good? Okay. Any questions for me? Would you like for me to speed up or slow down?
No, I think you're doing great. I appreciate
Good, good pace? Okay, good. And I hope that real life examples help as well. So let's talk about the outsourcing process. We are seeing this happen very much so. I just talked to another government consultant earlier today before I jumped on with you all. And she too is in government contracting like me. And we were talking and she was giving me some pointers. But what's interesting, she says, you know what? She was like, now the government's got to figure out how they're going to outsource. And I'm like, man, I didn't know the government outsourced like that. She's like, oh yeah. So here's the thing. Every company is just about outsource. It doesn't matter if it's the government or not. The reason why we're seeing all of these layoffs is because we know that companies do not have the strategic capital to sustain what is happening with these tariffs. These tariffs is causing a lot of rift with a lot of companies, right? And so they're going to find themselves having to outsource. But before they do it, they have to first ask themselves, what are we outsourcing and why? So when we talk about outsourcing processes, that you have to analyze the needs and define the goals. Why are you outsourcing? What is the need for outsourcing? How long are we going to outsource? You have to define a budget. You have to create a request for proposal. Then you have to send that request for proposal to chosen contractors. That would be me or a consultant, right? Again, outsourcing these things because it's cheaper, believe it or not. And I don't like to use that word, but I don't know any other word to use. It's more cost effective. There we go. It's more cost effective to outsource some of these things than to not to allow your competitors to kind of swoop in on you. Because even though these tariffs is creating a lot of havoc and we have not seen how this thing is going to flush out, again, you never should walk in fear, but just be mindful as an HR professional that if you see the process slow down within your department, if they start cutting back on training and development, or they stop cutting back on some of the perks and benefits, or they start cutting back on hiring, or they're taking forever to hire someone, or they're taking forever to terminate someone, there's a reason behind it, right? There's always a reason behind what we do in HR. But when we talk about this outsourcing, companies are going to have to outsource because they don't want to lose business altogether. So they're going to have to find someone that's going to be able to sustain their nature of business so that their competitors don't. And so when you talk about sending this request for proposal, now a company has to sit back and say, okay, we have all these proposals coming from different contractors that can help us with XYZ. How do we evaluate those proposals? You know, how do we choose a contractor? How do we negotiate a contract? How do we implement project and monitor a schedule and evaluate a project? Now, let me show you an example or share with you how this would look like on an exam. You are taking your SHRM exam and it may say, as it relates to outsourcing process, what is step number 3 when it comes to outsourcing process? Now, if you don't know this process, it's going to be hard for you to kind of narrow it down. Here's the beauty about the exam, and it's safe for me to say this. There is always 2 answers that is not going to be it. It's going to seem like it. And we're going to cover some questions here in a second. There are going to be 2 questions that you could automatically scratch out, even though they're going to sound reasonable. There's going to be one that you're like, oh, yes. And you might choose that one. But then there's one that is definitely the right answer. So you're always going to have a 50-50 chance to get the answer right. I encourage you, as I stated, take the pre-exam, the one that's in your platform, the SHRM platform. Take that. I took it in bits and pieces, and I did not do that well. I think I got like a 40%. But then once I went through this program like you all, I think I ended up getting like an 80 at the end of the SHRM class. I encourage you to take it because it gets you comfortable with what the real exam looks like. So do not beat yourself up if you fail it. That's not the point of me wanting you to take it. I want you to get comfortable understanding how they're going to ask you questions. Some may seem very tricky. And then there's going to be 2 answers that you're going to say, well, all of them could be the right answer. And then there's going to be times where you're like, absolutely not. That doesn't even go with that. And you'll be able to kind of, process of elimination. But when you run across those questions that have these steps like this outsource process or centralized or decentralized or shared excellence, and if you don't know that, it's going to be very hard. So they may say, okay, out of the outsourcing process, what's step number 3 in the outsourcing process when a company's trying to decide whether or not to outsource to a contractor? Well, the answer in this question is create an RFP. But if you don't know it, it's going to be hard for you to try. And here's the thing, the answers may have all of these. Number 1 may be create an RFP. Number 2 is it evaluate the proposal. Number 3 is implement a project, the monitoring schedule. Or number 4, choose the contractor. Oh, they'll lay it out for you real pretty. And you're going to say, well, I think they're all right. And technically, they all are right because it's part of the outsourcing process. But here's the SHRM thing. If you listen to my question, they said, what's step number 3 in the outsourcing process, then your answer would be create an RFP. Does that make sense? Because this is how they lace up the questions. Because all of my answers that I gave you are correct. They're all part of the outsourcing process. But their question is, what's step number 3? Or what's step number 1? Or they hit you with, what's the first step before deciding to hire a contractor? What's the final step? They always hit you with the first step. What's the final step? What's the third step? So why am I saying that? So that you get yourself comfortable enough to say, okay, I need to understand the outsourcing process. Let me make this logical, right? And then answer it according to Sharm Think. Okay. All right. Any questions thus far? Let me see what time it is. Okay. Let's talk about some balanced scorecard. We know that scorecards is very important. You can have an HR scorecard. You can have a sales scorecard. You can have a marketing scorecard. You can have just about anything as a scorecard. A scorecard is basically a baseline, okay? For us HR professionals, we use it as a clear baseline for us to see snapshot of our strategic goals and our strategic performance and how we're gonna get there, okay? So it's basically, where are we? How are we gonna get there? What's our avenues? What's the measurable results? How do we validate it? You know, how do we look at the metrics? How do we measure? What are our targets? How do we align? When I think of a balanced scorecard, those are the keywords that come to mind for me. So if I was studying with you all, that's the first thing I would have to say to myself is, okay, what is about? I can't remember all of this stuff on this slide if I was studying for. Like, this is too much to remember, right? So for me and my study group, we came up with acronyms. We came up with acronyms and we studied every Sunday. Sometimes we switched it to Saturday because, you know, we wanted to spend time with our family and friends, but we studied every week together in person. We met at the library sometimes. One of them had a job where her VP of HR encouraged us, like we used their building. Her boss was so cool. They were like, no, you have a key, just use your code and you all study, order food. And so we sat and we was like, okay, balanced scorecard, what is it? And we would just be like, okay, we know it's measurement, results, it's a snapshot. We know it's strategic performance. We know it helps with strategic goals. Okay, we could not remember because we had the slides in front of us. So we had one person in our group that had all the slides up. We had another person that had up the platform, the questions, and then we had our books. So it was like 5 of us. We all were hitting a different angle. And then we had a big old whiteboard. And so we just kind of went through and we're like, okay, what's centralized? What's decentralized? How do we want to remember that? So those were the things that we had to do because this is a lot of information. So if I was studying with you all, I would say to you, just know what a balanced scorecard is. Know that it's a snapshot from strategic goals, strategic performance. Those 2 words tell me what it is. Strategic goals and strategic performance. That's a balanced scorecard. That's how I had to remember to pass my exam, using acronyms and short phrases. I couldn't remember all of this stuff on this slide. It was too much, right? So when I say balanced scorecard, you already know strategic goals, strategic performance. That's what it is. That's a balanced scorecard. Strategic goals, strategic performance. It measures, it has metrics, it's a snapshot in time. That's what it is. It's a clear depiction of our goals and our performance as an organization. That's what a balanced scorecard is. So let's talk a little bit about sample HR metrics. Here's another example of how we had to remember how to study. So when I had to remember HR metrics, this is a lot. This slide is doing a whole bunch. It's busy. This is a lot, okay? But when you think of HR metrics, we know that these are all the things we use as an organization to measure our performance overall. We look at absent rate, human capital, value added, cost per hire. So you may get a question, out of all of these listed, which one is an HR metric? Again, you're going to have 2 that's going to seem like they both could be the answer. And then you're going to have 2 that's not even going to be part of the answer. Or they may hit you with 4 possibles, but there's only one that's actually the right answer. So again, just understanding, make sure that you read the question and you read the question again. That's why it's important that you all take the pre-exam and the post-exam within your SHRM platform to get comfortable of how they're going to ask questions, okay? That's why you should take that and take your time, because when you get in the exam, it is time. And even if you get up and go to the bathroom, the clock still keeps going. Yeah, it doesn't pause when you go to the bathroom. So get comfortable kind of sitting in that type of environment where you're having to think on the fly, but understand the context. But these are sample HR metrics: turnover rate, turnover cost, vacancy cost, key talent retention, transfer, applicant yield ratio, human capital ROI, HR staff per full-time employee. These are all metrics that us HR professionals use when we talk about the HR department. So let's talk a little bit about types of HR audits, okay? These are audits that are conducted within human resources: compliance, best practices, strategic, and functional. If I had to remember this for studying, I would come up with an acronym. I don't know what acronym it would be, but I would find one that I could remember. When I think of HR audits, the first thing comes to my mind is compliance. That's the first thing that comes to me. So when they talk about, hey, you know, which one of these could be an HR audit or be part of an HR audit? Well, we know compliance is important. We know you got to have best practices. And we have to also understand that a policy and a practice are two totally different things. Make sure you understand that from a practicality standpoint. Just because someone has a best practice does not make it a policy. There is a difference. What stands up in a court of law is policy. Now, best practices may come into mind, but when you look at things on its face and you talk about looking at the letter of the law, I often have heard many employment attorneys say, what is the company policy? They may have had a best practice, but was it written? So I always try to go to the side of caution policy. So understand that when it comes to HR audits, you look at compliance, best practices, strategic, and functional specific. These are different types of HR audits. Okay, here's an HR process. Determine the scope of the audit, what you're going to audit. Develop an audit questionnaire. What questions are you going to ask? Collect data. How are you going to collect the data? Benchmark. How are you going to benchmark your findings? How are you going to provide results to your constituents or your leaders or senior leadership? Once you determine what you've audited, and once you find some issues, because you will, because no company is perfect, then you have to develop an action plan to correct your findings, and then you need to implement new continuous improvement. So this is how I would study trying to understand the HR process, the HR audit process, is let me make sense of this. Well, what am I auditing? I have to first determine what type of scope of the audit type. I need to ask questions, because one thing about an audit is you never want to go into any audit without having questions, because you need to find answers. So I'm a person that kind of works backwards. I always say, what do I want to know? So if I'm developing, trying to understand an HR audit process, you first have to know, what are you going to audit and what's the scope of your audit? What questions do I need answered? What is it that I want to know? Do I want to know, are we doing an I-9 audit accurately? Do I want to know if they're following all of the strategic letter interviewing documents? I want to interview, I want to document, our interview process, make sure, they're asking all the candidates the right questions. Like, what questions do I want to know for this audit? And then I need to collect that data. Do I want to know, are we doing exit interviews within our department? And then what do I want to audit? What questions do I want to know? What questions and answers do I need to walk away from? How am I going to collect the data? Am I going to track it in our HRI system for everybody to see it? Or am I going to track it in an Excel spreadsheet just for myself before I aggregate the data? What am I going to do? And then what am I benchmarking it against? What am I using to benchmark my findings? Am I benchmarking it against industry standards? Or am I benchmarking it against organizational standards? Because there's a difference. Once I benchmark it, now I need to provide results, because my boss, HR, is asking, my VP of HR is asking, well, Shay, what did you find? How am I going to give results? How am I going to streamline this data? Am I going to give her raw data or aggregated data? What am I going to give her? I don't want to hide anything. We don't do that in HR. How am I going to give her results without overwhelming her? Do I give her a snapshot, or do I just give her the overall, here's what I found? And then once I do all of that, she's going to ask, well, what's our plan of action, Shay? What do we do next? Well, I need to have a plan of action. Never go to a meeting with your boss or manager without having a plan of action. Never show up into a meeting complaining about how messed up HR is unless you have a plan of action. So you want to make sure that you have a plan of action to say, hey, here's what I found. And then also, what are we going to do differently going forward? So that's the HR audit process. Every organization, just like right now, according to a recent article, organizations are going to have to look at their job descriptions. They're going to have to make sure that it takes away all that DEI language, all of that. So that's an audit process in and of itself, is making sure that your job descriptions are inclusive in nature, but not segregating different people from different walks of life. So companies should be auditing their job descriptions right now as we speak based off of recent articles, right? So again, looking at that HR audit process. Okay, that's it. That's part one. Let's take a break. Let me see what time it is. I'm gonna let my dog out at 6:30. Why don't you come back at like 6:37? Take a break, stretch your legs, and then we'll jump into a few questions, and then we'll jump into the second part of this. Okay? That work? Cool. See you in a second. All right. If you are back with me, drop a 1 in the chat, or I can see you. Either one. Hi. Look, dog did not want to go back in his little room. He knows when I'm like locking him up. So I let him go out to go to the bathroom. So I'm trying to lock him up in my room. And I'm like, come here, buddy. He looking at me sideways. I'm like, yeah, you must know you're about to get locked up in purgatory, as I call it. So cool. Welcome back. I know we're waiting on one more person, which we will do that. How are you all feeling so far? What questions do you have? What would you like to talk about? What is it that I can do to support you thus far?
Well, your description of the functional and dedicated were really helpful. Like just trying to read the text is so confusing. And so the real life application has been really helpful.
Good, good, good. I'm glad. Yeah, that was one that I struggled with too, Christine. Because at the time I hadn't worked in a matrix organization or anything, or I did work in it. But I still struggle with it because I was working in it. I understood it, but it was hard to try to conceptualize it based off of the book. I'm like, this is too much. I'm like, I do this, but what does this really mean? So I'm glad that was helpful. Anybody else? Anything else kind of stand out for you? Anything else been helpful to you? Anybody else? How is everybody feeling? Good? Okay. Again, I'm gonna save my story for the end. I don't want to freak you out. So I'm gonna save that. We can laugh about it. So we're gonna jump into this other part. So before we jump into part 2, we're gonna cover a few questions. Okay. And so we're gonna act like that this is, and I got my phone out because Patrick sent me the answers. But we're gonna go through and we're gonna cover a few questions. Okay. And we're gonna walk through this together. Okay, let me put you back up here. Here we go. We're gonna walk through these questions together. We're gonna dissect it, and we're going to ask ourselves the right question. So I'm gonna read it once, and then I'm gonna read it twice, and then I'm gonna read the answers. Okay. Which of the following HR responsibilities are an example of HR's administrative role? Which of the following HR responsibilities are an example of HR's administrative role? Is it A, aligning HR strategy with the organizational strategy? Is it B, focusing on core capabilities? Is it C, targeted talent acquisition and development? Is it D, employee engagement programs? Which of the following is HR responsibilities are an example of an HR administrative role? So what it's asking here is that when it comes to HR responsibilities, which one of these is an example of someone that's in an administrative role? In order to answer this, we have to first understand what's administrative and what's operational. Remember that at the beginning? We got operational and HR administrative. So before we answer, again, we're looking for an example of HR's administrative role. Which two can we get rid of? And when we think of administrative, I look at it as the basics, not the high level, tactical, strategic.
We get rid of A,
Okay.
talking about strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And then get rid of C and D because they're operational, from what I remember.
Y'all are right. B is the answer, focusing on core capabilities. And so when you talk about SHRM Think, that's where the questions are going to come. The answers is only part of it. It's the questions that they try to trick you up. Because here's what they did. They threw in the HR responsibilities. Well, let's just be honest. All of these, remember, is part of HR. We do all of this stuff in HR. Talent acquisition, we deal with employee engagement. We focus on capabilities, core capabilities, and we also help align different things that we're asked to do that's not in our job description. So all of these, again, this is a prime example of me saying all of them could be right. Okay, all of these are HR responsibilities, but what it asked us was, which is an example of HR administrative role? And the answer is B.
I think the trick for me was I had to go back and look at what core capabilities were.
Mm-hmm.
I answered that wrong if I didn't go back and look at that.
Definitely. And that's why studying, going through the questions on your own. And so one of the things that helped me, and I'll share this with you all and we'll move on, because we all busy, you all. And like I said, the time that I got my certification, I had family members that were like passing away like every 6 months. It was a lot going on, one from cancer, one from a car accident. It was just a lot. And then my job was demanding. And I was like you, I didn't miss a class. I showed up every week. And then I met up with my study group. I mean, there was a lot going on to where I felt overwhelmed. And it takes a lot to get me overwhelmed. But what I had to remind myself is that if I did not sit down and read, okay, because we know, I remember my attorney friend, she said, Shay, she was like, well, how many pages? I said, I feel like I'm reading a law journal.
Yeah.
And y'all probably can contest to that. That reading, brutal. So what I did is if I did not read every day, I made myself a commitment that I would touch SHRM stuff every day, even if it's 15 minutes. So I downloaded it all on my devices. I took my computer everywhere with me, but if I did not read, I at least would come home after I showered and got relaxed and got up in my bed before it's time to go to sleep. And I would pull up the SHRM platform and I would just answer 2 or 3 questions. That I had to keep it in front of me so that I wouldn't forget it, because it's a lot of information. And like Donna's point, I mean, we study core capabilities at the beginning of class. Now you're asking me this question, trying to walk through some of the questions. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I'm like, Donna, there was things I had to go back and say, wait a minute. And that to me was a clear indication that I needed to keep this information in front of me. So again, to each his own, but that's what I had to do, because I remember going 2 days without touching it. And when I picked the book back up, I felt myself getting uninterested. I'm like, wait a minute, what is this again? And that was my indication, like, okay, Shay, you can't stay away from this like this. It's like accounting. You don't do accounting every day, you'll forget, right? So just find a way that works for you and don't beat yourself up, but try to at least every day, even if it's reading 2 or 3 pages out of the book and highlighting a few things, or getting into, the questions and answering. Just always try to keep it in front of you, because at the end of the day, let me just be honest and transparent. And this is coming from nothing but a place of love. By the time the exam comes, you either know it or you don't. There's no in between. You're either going to know it or you're not. And the only way to know it is to study for it every day, whether it's 15 minutes or 3 hours if you have it because your family's out on a outing or whatever, but keep it in front of you every day. That's the best advice I can give you. Because when the exam comes, you're either gonna know it or you're not, right? All right, so let's jump into this next question. Okay. Oh, here we go. Love this. Which of the following? Okay, so which of the following HR structures would be best for an organization that has a presence in several global areas with distinct local cultures? Which of the following HR structures would be best for an organization that has a presence in several global areas with distinct local cultures? Before you all look at the answers, let's dissect what they're doing here. They've asked you 3 or 4 different things. They've actually threw in information that you're just like, why are they doing it? It's all by design. But what we want to know for this question is which one is best. Remember, I told you there's 2 that's probably not going to be it at all. And then they give you 2 answers that one is the exact answer. And then sometimes you'll think that that's the best answer. So what they're asking you for in this question is, which is the best HR structure for an organization that's operating in global areas with distinct local cultures? They threw a lot of things in there, but what you're going to focus on is the question of the question. Which one is the best HR structure for an organization operating in several global areas that has distinct local cultures? Local cultures is just another term for local norms. Okay. So they're just saying, hey, which one of these structures are best for an organization that operates globally and operates with distinct local norms and cultures? Which one of these structures is going to be best for an organization like that? That's what SHRM is asking you. What are your thoughts? I'm looking at my answers here. Which 2 can we get rid of? If we're looking at structures, that's what they're asking us, structures.
Can we get rid of centralized right away?
You can.
In the center of excellence.
You can. Why are we getting rid of those? Let's talk through. Why are we getting rid of center of excellence?
Because isn't center of excellence where everything is right there and everybody is,
You're thinking of shared services, kind of along the
maybe
lines.
that's what I'm thinking is
Yeah,
shared
it's
services,
okay.
but
Yeah, that's why we're walking through it. So center of excellence is kind of where they're trying to foster growth or foster improvement. So center of excellence is when you have organizations say, hey, we're a center of excellence. They're basically saying to you, well, we foster growth and we foster improvement. Okay, so that's what center of excellence. Just think of growth, foster improvement, foster growth. That's what center of excellence is. So yeah, we can get rid of that because they're not asking us about growth. They're not asking us about performance. Since we know what center of excellence is, we can get rid of it, right? Which other one did you all say you want to get rid of? Let me look at my notes here. Okay.
Centralized.
Centralized. Why are we getting rid of centralized?
Because it's global and it says several global areas with a distinct local culture. So I guess that made me feel like it would be decentralized if it was several global areas.
I like how you think. So yeah, so we know what centralized and decentralized is, right? What is centralized?
Everything's together at one location.
And decentralized?
Everything, it's done in different the same things are done in different locations.
Yeah, and why do we not want global resources? Because why? That's not an HR structure.
Yeah, that didn't fit.
Didn't fit. So you can kind of see how you do this process of elimination. The correct answer, Donna, you are correct, is actually A, decentralized, because here's the question, and why does it make it make it A? Because it says which one of these structures? Well, we know that decentralized and centralized is one of the structures. Okay, we know global resources is not a structure. It's a resource. We can a process of elimination. It's asking us which one of these are best for several global areas. And remember, decentralized is kind of all over the place. They go to central to get what they need, but they're like my example, I was decentralized. I was in Indianapolis and my coworker was in Texas. Decentralized, but we got our information from centralized corporate in Detroit, Michigan. So that's how you can process and eliminate. It ain't gonna be global resources because we're not talking about resources. And center of excellence, we know center of excellence is about fostering growth and improvement. It didn't ask us about growth and improvement. It asked us which one of these structures. So if I know decentralized and centralized, I can process of elimination and say, it's one of these answers. Well, I know centralized means everything is in one central focus point, and decentralized means other areas. And it said local cultures, which tells me many cultures, not one. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So the answer is A.
so they basically just threw the global resources in there to throw you on that global.
That's what they're going to do.
Make your mind go there.
Yes, and here's the beauty thing about the exam. That's exactly my point, Lori. And what they're going to do with the exam is, at least I did it, you get to mark it and come back to it as if you have time. But here's the thing with that. You got to make sure that you structure your time, because if you kind of stuck on a question, it allows you to mark it and come back to it. But if you forget to come back to it, you know what I mean? So again, just structure, and we'll talk about, some best practices that you can utilize when you all go take the exam. But yeah, that's exactly, they will throw in something that, like this has nothing to do with anything. And that's what I want you to do, is do the SHRM thing. And you have to ask yourself, what does SHRM want me to get out of this? And that's where all of us has been doing it, like Don and all of us been doing it a long time. I had to literally peel back my own mentality about HR and not answer it the way that I would answer it. And that's what SHRM wants you to get out of. That's why they call it SHRM thing. They're saying, how would we answer this? Think of it again. The people that wrote this is the very people that sit at the corporate office in Virginia. These people rewrite these exams, and they got sample questions, but they're all written by HR professionals and lawyers. So just be mindful of the fact, how do they want me to answer this? I can't answer it according to my everyday task on how I operate. I have to answer it according to what's in front of me. And so you just have to begin, like I did, pull those layers back. So yes, they will throw on things that have nothing to do with anything. Let's do this last one. Which type of audit best helps an organization maintain or improve a competitive advantage? Which type of audit? And we just kind of talked about these audits. And if you remember, and even if you look at your notes, I don't mind it, but think of it this way. We just talked about audits. There's only a couple of these that seem familiar to me if I was studying this. And the question is, which type of audit best helps an organization maintain or improve a competitive advantage? Which two can we eliminate?
Compliance and functions specific.
Okay. Is compliance a type of audit?
Yeah, it is.
So that's a possible one, but okay. And you said get rid of function specific. I don't recall. Is function specific a type of audit? Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Yeah, it is.
It is? Oh, it is. Sorry. So here's our slide. Compliance, best practices, strategic, and functional. Now see how they wonderfully through all of these into the question. Remember I said that? You see that? All of these are right. Now, I'm glad they did this because this gives us a opportunity to walk through how you would answer before I give you the answer. As we know, going back to my slide, these are all the right answers. Compliance, best practices, strategic, and function specific. But the question was, which type of audit will best help an organization improve and maintain competitive advantage? In order to answer this, we first have to understand the definition of compliant, strategic, function specific, or best practices. But to your point, Lori, we can already get rid of compliance and function specific. So again, if we're trying to help an organization improve or maintain a competitive advantage, which two between, well, it's going to be between strategic and best practices. Which one of these are going to help us maintain a competitive advantage?
I want to say best practices.
I wanted to say strategic.
Okay, let's talk through it. Why do you say strategic, Donna? No, it's all good. Why
Well, because I think best practices is more of an internal kind of a thing. And you kind of mentioned earlier, it's really not policy driven. So you're trying to get a competitive advantage over other organizations. They aren't really going to know what your best practices are, is how I was thinking. I don't know.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. And I would have said that answer too, but I'm gonna switch my mindset to Sherm thing, and Sherm says best practices. Donna, I'm with you on it. Trust me, because we've been doing this a long time. I would have said the same thing. And matter of fact, I probably got this wrong during the class function of this. Now that I think about it, and look, and now I'm sitting here facilitating y'all, and I got this question probably wrong when I was in class. But here's the beauty of it. The question is basically trying to improve that competitive advantage, and what the answer is saying is best practices. Because if
I can tell you what I focused on that made me go to my SHRM think was they're asking maintaining and improving. So you're maintaining what you've already done. So that's your best practice of what you've already done.
And you're trying to maintain.
That's where I went.
Yeah, and I'm with Donna though. I think strategic. I'm like, well, in order to outdo my competition, I gotta be strategic. If I'm that's where I'm with her. See what I mean? But this is a prime example of how you have to literally peel back those layers and give yourself some grace, because all of these answers are right. And that's the example of what I gave you all. They'll give you all the answers because it's all these are all audits, but they're saying which one is best. And that's the key word I want you to focus on. Sherm used that wording, which is best. They go, which is first? What's the first step? What's the last step? What's the third step? What's the best option? What's the first thing you will do? When you see those questions, that tells you that you need to understand the step process. SHRM kind of goes in this big old circle. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, know the audits. This is how you all were able to answer. So that's the thing that you have to focus on. Read the question, read the question. Does anybody not understand why they chose best practices? We're good to move on? Everybody good? Okay, cool. All right, let's talk about total rewards. How would you base your organization total rewards? Do you think that they are, you don't have to tell me where you work, I don't need to know any of that, but just either currently or past jobs or, thoughts. What are your thoughts as it relates to total rewards in today's culture and climate with individuals needing time off, family responsibility, caregiving responsibility, kids, all types of things. How do you think your company stack up against their competitors as it relates to total rewards? What are your thoughts?
We stink at it right now because, like I said, I'm building all this. They had absolutely nothing, so we're working on that and trying to figure out what that
How do
is.
you feel when you say you're building it all? You're basically responsible. So where are you getting your help from? Because you know SHRM can help you with that. You know
Oh,
that.
I go to sherm.org quite often, and I've been on the chat sites with SHRM, putting my questions out there to get feedback from everybody, and just kind of bunch of different things. So yeah.
Yeah, another option for you as well, which was so helpful for me when I got into HR, is not only that, Laura, you can actually call them too.
I've done that before
Yeah,
too.
and they'll connect you with someone, or they'll send you a whole bunch of resources, as you and I know, in an email, and you're like, "Ah," and then you just have to sort through it. But yes, that's good to know that you're
Right.
able to do that. Okay, anybody else? How do you think your organization stack up with rewards against the competitors? Do you think they're doing great, or you all can stand for improvement? What's your thoughts?
Well, I work for the city of Franklin, and it's municipality, and they're very well known for not paying well. They're also very well known for not being caught up with
Okay.
the rest of the world, because they really don't I mean, they have competitors to a point, but so they try to find, I guess, creative ways to have extra kinds of benefits, and they found financially they've been able to take our benefits premiums way low, like pay probably 95% of an employee's premiums, which is wonderful. So you add that plus the salary, and that's really great. But what they don't do well in is like time off. I mean, we're still stuck back in the dark ages with giving people time off, and they have to earn 1 week the first year and get their 2 weeks the next year. And it's like, really? But the thing about municipalities, Shay, is you can't change those things without going through the proper processes, and the board of the board members have to vote it in. The city councils have to vote them in. So I'm used to just going, oh, this job description needs an update, or this needs a change, or whatever. And you have to stop, and everything's a process, and it takes forever. So it almost makes you not want to mess with it. Like, oh, they've been good with this for a while. We'll just leave it alone.
Let me just not touch that. Okay. Yeah. Totally different when you talk about the municipalities. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, cool. Let's talk about some total rewards real quick. All right, total reward strategy. So again, as we know, everything that we do just about in HR is going to have a goal, a strategic step to it, or process. Okay, that's just how HR works. It's one of those functions, right? So when you talk about looking at the strategy and what that looks like and how to look at the total reward, excuse me, I'm trying to move this over here. One thing about it, okay, there we go. One thing about it is it has both input processes and outputs. And so that's part of what we do when we talk about the total reward strategy, is that you have to, one, have those HR goals. Again, HR is one of those functions where we have goals for just about everything, whether it's recruitment goals, engagement goals, retention goals. And that's kind of where the total rewards, your total rewards package is either going to attract or retain your employees, or do a combination of both. The goal is to have them both simultaneously working on all cylinders. Because again, when we're living in a culture and climate that companies are competing for the same talent, it's going to really boil down to a company's benefit package. And as we know, just because someone gets offered $60,000 in terms of compensation, we know that that is not the total compensation package. What's going to help employees and attract the right talent is your total rewards. And so being able to look at what those processes look like, what are the inputs, how are you going to align it with the strategy, the culture, how does it benchmark against the market, and then of course making sure that they're applicable when it comes to employment laws and regulations, because you have federal laws, but then you also have state and local laws that a company has to make sure that their total rewards is aligned with, right? And again, if you have employees that live in Indiana, versus California. We know that California, New York, those are two separate states with their own separate issues, right? They could be a world by themselves because their laws are so different. And so when a company has many different business units, right, and they're looking at their total rewards, total compensation rewards for an organization, what they pay an employee in the Midwest is going to be different than what they pay an employee in California. What they offer, like for example, employees in California, when you talk about what an employer pays into for employees in California, employees actually can take time off from an injury that's not workman's comp related. Oh yeah, I found this out through my own research and study, having to work with the client. I'm like, wait a minute, what? They can take time off that's not work related, workman's comp related? California is a totally different world and a totally different beast. Why is that important? Because when a company is structuring their rewards and they're looking at how they're going to attract and retain talent, they have to consider all of their business units in order to operate on all cylinders. And then you have to be able to kind of look at those outputs as well. You know, what is that compensation, that benefit package? What's the reward? What's the incentive? You know, how are you going to retain people? How are you going to keep people? You know, you can give away certain things in California that you can't give away over here in the Indiana, and the same thing in New York. They have certain laws that you have to apply. You know, how do you retain? Of course, you got to pay them more. That's why we now know at the end of all job descriptions, it says, oh, this depends on your geographic location, because they have to make sure that they hit employment laws and regulations. And so a lot of companies, I'm noticing too, says, where do you live? Without really saying it, they're saying this position has to make sure that it operates. What's that wording I saw in that job description? It said, they didn't come out right and ask you where you live. They said something like, this position, this pays in Indiana, so-and-so, New Mexico. And it went on, it listed all these city and states, but then it says your compensation will be derivative where you'll be stationed at virtually. Will you be near a headquarters? I'm like, okay. They're basically trying to cut corners, making sure that, hey, we're going to pay you, but they want to make sure that where you say you live at is where you're going to be operating virtually, because companies have got in trouble because, believe it or not, remember during the pandemic, people got up and started uprooting themselves and moved to Florida and different parts of the world. Now companies are now realizing, wait a minute, that's a liability from a standpoint. We need to know where you're actually going to be operating. Are you going to be near a headquarters? And so that's all important when you talk about total compensation, because if that's the case, if someone knows they're going to make more money in California, which we know California pays a whole lot more than the Midwest, you know, do you want employees jumping ship to move to California because they know they're going to get another 60, 70, 80, 90 grand on the dollar? These things are important when you talk about the total reward strategy. So let's talk about total rewards a little bit. Let's go ahead and look at terminology. I would encourage you to know this slide. Just know a little bit about it, okay? What is total rewards? What's benefits? What's compensation? What's perks? I can't even say it. Perks, incentives, and premiums. So when we talk about total rewards, we know that it is basically an approach that companies use to try to attract, recognize, and retain workers. Okay, they look at both compensation and benefits, and sometimes those are used interchangeably. As I mentor and coach people in HR, young adults that's getting into HR, that's in HR, I say to them, hey, listen, it's cool. It's okay to look at that compensation, that dollar amount, but what are you getting? What are the benefits they're going to give you? What are the total payments? Because the truth of the matter is that if a company may not give you out raises every year, or they may give out small raises, if they give you $15,000, $20,000 in professional development, that's added on to your compensation. It's not just derivative of $60,000. If they're saying, hey, we'll pay for this amount for professional development, you want to tack that on, because again, that is a benefit, right? Tangible payments, you know, that they give to employees to cover different things, whether it's retirement, paid time off, how much paid time off they give you. Like I tell my mentees, you can negotiate paid time off when you interview with the company. You don't have to just accept, you know, no, there's a way to do it, a way to say it, be eloquent about it, and say, hey, listen, you know, I'm leaving this company, or the company that laid me off, or the company that shut down. When I left there, you know, I had 2 weeks of vacation, and normally, you know, I like to do things on vacation with family and friends. May I negotiate an extra week? I understand you're giving me a week, but may I, you know, because that's something I've always done. If I, you know, was not at a company, or the company folded early on in my career, I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't take time off. I'm losing 2 weeks, and you're hiring me to be an HR manager, but you're only giving me 1 week. Let me negotiate. But that's what my mentor showed me how to do. She's like, Shay, you negotiate negotiate these things. Why are this important? Because again, we're all fighting for the same talent. And so employees want to know that they're going to get something other than you giving them $60,000. What is going to be their total compensation? What are some other tangible benefits and payments? Are you going to allow them to invest in 401k? How long do they have to wait? You know, are you matching them up to 7%, you know, when it comes to 401k match? You know, how much are you going to spend on professional development? Are you going to make me pay for it up front and then tell me to reimburse you? Like, these are things you need to ask, right? So again, this is all part of the total reward strategy. And then what are some of the perks, goods and services? You know, are you going to pay for my cell phone? Am I going to get a company car? You know, when I got to travel, are you going to let me rent a car? Do I have to put miles on my truck? Like, these are things that you have to ask. Again, all part of the total reward strategy and the terminology. And then being able to look at those incentive and premiums, you know, specifically targeting, you know, how do I calculate how much am I really making? You're giving me 60,000, but how much does my total vacation, the professional development, the time off, the sick time, the 401k, the 7% match, all of this I need to add up as a new hire or potential candidate before I join your company to understand what it's really going to do to benefit me. Because again, these are things that is important to your candidates and the people that you're hiring. So when you kind of look at the compensation philosophy, every company just about have a compensation philosophy. Not all, but some have a compensation philosophy. And it's basically just looking at, you know, what's fair, what's competitive, and how it's aligned to how is it aligned to the company and their policies and their philosophy. As we know, everything has went up in the last 5 years. The number 2 big expenses of an organization is their salary and their wages. Those are the 2 biggest expenses of an organization, their salary and their wages. Okay. Everything has went up in the last 5 years except salaries, right? When we had the financial boom that happened in 2022, where the bottom fell out of it, when the pandemic happened and people were jumping ship, I knew people that jumped ship from their company and went to work for other companies because they were paying them a lot of money. And I just remember having a conversation. I'm like, hey, listen, the bottom is going to fall out of this. Just make sure that you prepare. And around 2021, the end of the 4th quarter into 2022, we began to see companies start cutting people in these high salaries because they understand the 2 biggest expenses is their salary and wages. If you don't know that, right? If the everyday Joe don't know that, the CFO knows that, right? The accounting and the CFO knows that. And so at the end of the day, we have to just be mindful of the fact that, no, we do need to have competitive programs. We do need to be fair and competitive. And we do need to make sure that we are trying to, you know, follow the market. But everything has went up. Inflation, 40-year all-time high. Everything has went up except salary and wages, which is why you are finding that what's going to be important for an organization is their total rewards package. How are they going to keep people? How are they going to retain people? How are they going to attract people, right? And then looking at not only that, you live in a city and state, or your company operates in a city and state that's required to list the salaries, right? That's another thing, because you got employees that are working in these companies, and then companies are hiring employees from outside. And, you know, people talk about their salaries. They're not supposed to, but they do, right? So what's going to be so important is that a company really do look at their total reward strategy. But basically, this philosophy says, hey, it's just something short that you're documenting how you're going to guide your organization through principles and core values as it relates to an employee compensation. Because believe it or not, we know that people talk about their salaries. They're not supposed to, which again, depending on what state you live in, but they do it anyway. So let's take a look at the total reward strategy. You might want to know this slide, okay? Because you might get some questions that ask you, what is the 3rd step, the 4th step? But in the short of it, I memorized this by utilizing, now we know what the ADDIE model is. ADDIE model is ADDIE, right? How I remembered this is I remember that was ADDIE just with 1 D. Y'all see the acronym? That's how I remembered this. I know what the ADDIE model was, ADDIE. I knew what that was. But in order to remember the total reward strategy, I said, wait a minute, it's the ADDIE model. It's the ADDIE word acronym without 2 Ds. That's how I remembered this. Assessment, design, implementation, evaluation. Okay. This is the process to develop. So for you, Lori, that's walking through, you know, being a department HR of 1, and you're having to come up with your strategy for the organization's total rewards, you're going to first assess, what is it that they need? What are your competitors doing? How do you assess? You can basically assess by doing a survey. You can send out a survey to ask them, what type of rewards would y'all like to see? And of course, you frame it to where you don't promise anything, but you don't take anything off the table either, right? You're just basically assessing them. You know, what is it that you all would like to see? What type of benefits would you like to see the organization have that we don't currently have? You collect that data, so you're going to assess them. Once you assess them, right, and I'm just using you as an example, I'm pretty sure you got this figured out, but overall, if anybody was doing this, right, you assess your company, and then at the end of the day, you get that information, you take a look at the data with senior leadership, and you say, okay, here's what employees are saying. And then you partner, of course, with senior leaders, including your CFO, to see, okay, what budget do we have? How are we going to go find a third party? And Donna can speak to this because she's benefit specialist as well. But how are we going to design this? How are we going to find the benefits, right, without breaking the bank, right? What type of benefits are we going to design that's going to include our total reward strategy? And then once we are able to design, and that's a process in and of itself, because you vet third party administrators, you find out who you're going to go with, you have conversations with them, you sit at the table with them, you ask questions. The CFO is going to say, this is what we can afford, this is what we're not going to afford. Senior leader is going to say, no, it's okay, it's expensive, we need it, how else are we going to get? Like, you're going to have all these conversations going, and then once you get to a place where you're ready to make a move, now you have to ask yourself, how are we going to implement it? How are we going to roll this out? Okay, and most third-party administrators will actually have consultants for their company that will come and walk you through how to implement it and roll it out seamlessly and effortlessly, right? Because what we don't want to do is mess with people's benefits and their pay. That's one thing we never want to do. I don't care what is happening. You never, ever, as an individual, right, ever mess with an employee's pay and their benefits. That's just something you do not want to mess with, right? You don't want to screw that up. So you find a way to implement it so it rolls out effortlessly and seamless, right? Then once you rolled it out, and it's been about 6 months, you evaluate, and you evaluate based off a benchmark, right? And you evaluate, how is this doing? What did we miss wrong? What did we get wrong? What is it we should have done that we did not do? What do we do with this information? Then how do we prove going forward when we talk about process improvement, right? So again, when we're looking at the design of a total reward strategy, I'm going to utilize the ADDIE acronym without the D. I'm going to assess, I'm going to design, I'm going to implement, I'm going to evaluate. Okay. All right. So now we're going to evaluate it. Okay. We're going to evaluate it. We want to evaluate it. And we have to make sure that, one, is in compliance, right? Is it comparable to the organization's mission and strategy? We never want to do anything, whether you're, the director of HR, you're the manager or the HR business partner, or if you're the department of 1 or a department of 15. We never want to do anything in HR that does not align with the organization's mission and strategy. It's wasting money, and we don't want to duplicate efforts, right? So we want to make sure that, one, we ask ourselves as we're evaluating our reward strategy, is it compliant? Does it align with the mission and strategy? Does it fit with the company culture and where it's going? Is it appropriate for the workforce, right? Is it internally equitable? Is it equitable for all? We're not isolating or pinning it for one group over another. We need to make sure that it's fair and equitable on its face, from A to Z. And then, is it externally competitive? What would make a person come work for our company versus our competitor? What is it about our rewards that's going to make someone come? Well, we understand as an organization, right, that we can't pay them a lot. We know that they're probably worth more than what we're giving them, but right now we don't have the budget, right, to pay them. But I need to fill this position, but I need to make sure I get the right person that has the ability. And for me as an HR person, I never hired people, and Donna can contest to this, I never hired someone for where they were. I hired them for where they could possibly go, right? And that's what we should all do. We should always think about the candidates like, hey, what will make them come work for us? It shouldn't just be the salary. What is it they can do for the organization? I know I'm hiring them for this, but what is it they can do for the organization, and making sure that our reward strategy is externally competitive? When we talk about pay strategies, okay, there is a difference between lag, match, lead, and lead lag. Okay, I'm gonna break these down very shortly here. So when we talk about salary and wages, right, and we know that the two biggest expenses of an organization is salary and wages. What we can also agree to is that right now the industry is lagging when it comes to salaries. They're lagging. There's not too many industries I know that are actually matching the industry right now. Very few. One that I could have said that was matching the industry was tech in 2024. I don't know what those numbers look like now, but the tech world, they were matching. They were matching, but now, as we know, they've been laying off and getting rid of people as well, and they've been cutting people in droves as well. But majority of the organizations right now have not redid their salary compensation to actually match the industry. Because what did I say? With inflation at an all-time high, salary and wages being two of the biggest expensive, organizations are losing people, and people are actually quitting, resigning, opening up their own business, just saying forget it all together. They're going to go be whatever, because they're realizing that the salaries are not matching, they're lagging. So lagging is looking at the fact that, hey, controlling those labor costs by setting the pay below other organizations. Again, maybe due to economic necessity. It may also be to help offset costs. And that's what we're going to see happen because of these tariffs. Okay. There are going to be some organizations, they're going to have to offset their cost, which is why some of them have laid off. Some of them are downsizing because they're going to have to find a way. It's either that, sink or swim. That's what it is for a lot of organizations. They're going to have to figure out how to offset those costs, right? And then they have to also look at it, because here's the truth of the matter is the organizations pick up most of the benefits anyway. So for those that are still working and have a job, they should be thankful that they have one because they haven't lost their job. But organizations are still picking up the bulk of this, the benefits, the compensation, and everything. Again, salary and wages, right? And if an organization is looking at pay strategies in terms of matching, right, that looks at, offer wages and benefits similar to the competition. Again, you'll have to benchmark and try to compare your industry against another industry to see if your compensation as an organization is matching or lagging your competitors. Or if you're an organization that's leading the market. In 2020, 2021, tech was leading the market in terms of compensation. They were outdoing a lot of industries, the tech world, in 2020 and 2021, and even 2022 before the bottom fell out of the financial crisis, meaning that a lot of people lost those high salaries that the tech companies were paying because they were leading the market in terms of salaries, okay? But now everyone has to cut cost, right? But when you're leading the market in terms of pay strategy, you're able to offer higher wages, better benefits, because you could justify it because of high productivity and high quality employees. And then that lag leads the market during the first half of the fiscal year and then lags the second half of the fiscal year. So these are 4 different pay strategies. I encourage you to know them. What is a lag? What is a match? What is a lead? And what is a lead lag? Lead lag. First fiscal year, they're leading the market. A second half of the fiscal year, they're lagging the market. Matching the market means you're matching with your competitors and industry benchmark standards. Lagging means you're just way behind the 8 ball and you just need to get it together as an organization. And if you're leading, that means that you're outdoing just about every industry when it comes to salaries. Pay strategies. Any questions or comments about that? What an organization do not want to do is do what happened in 2020, 2021, and part of 2022, when a lot of tech companies were leading the market with these high salaries, and then they had to start chopping them off. You don't want to do that because, one, you change people's lives. As my mentor has always told me, she says, Shay, when you hire someone, you change their life. And when you terminate them, you change their life. Either way, you're going to change their life, but you need to do it with dignity and respect. You're giving people these high salaries. And then when it's time for you to cut costs because you're leading the market, the tech world, they start chopping up salaries at the bit. And so the highest salaries are always the ones just about that companies look at because they're paying them extremely well. So a company does not want to lead the market, not in that case, tech world. You want to lead it, but you don't want to outdo it to where it busts your salary and wages budget. You want to make sure that you're doing it enough to match your competitors, but you're leading enough to try to attract talent, but that it doesn't bust your salary and wages budget. That's where your CFO comes in at. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, let's talk about global influences real quick. So there's many global influences, okay? Standardization versus localization. You got the culture, you got the competitive labor market, you got collective bargaining, employee representation, you got those government mandates, you got economic factors and taxation. So the importance of total rewards is that you have to communicate it. You have to communicate what you plan to do. One thing a company can benefit from is communicating every integral part. If you are changing your rewards or you're about to implement rewards, the best thing you can do is over communicate. One thing about total rewards is that the program is a very good, powerful motivator when it comes to employees understanding what they're getting, what's going away, and how it impacts them. So one thing I can say is that if you and your company is going through any type of change, whether it's reward strategy, different compensation philosophy, whatever it is, you want to over communicate, not under communicate. The last thing you want is upset employees, not in this culture and climate, because everybody's fighting for the same talent. So how do you effectively communicate? Okay, there's many ways, and I'm just going to kind of touch on these. Think about how you're going to communicate. What's required? What's going to be voluntary? What's going to be the method of communication? How are you going to directly communicate? Individualized total compensation statements, self-service technology, utilizing your company's intranet, and then being consistent with those messages. So again, if your company is going to send out messages every Monday or every Tuesday about you all switching a provider, going from Blue Cross Blue Shield to United Healthcare and the impact, you never want to hide anything from your employees, but you give them enough information that keeps you compliant, but not enough where you're just telling them all of your HR business, because legally you don't want to get yourself in trouble. We don't want to promise anything. We want to make sure that everything we do is compliant from an HR standpoint, but over communicating and being effective in your communication is so important when you talk about looking at a strategy, you talk about implementing that strategy, looking at the guidelines and making sure that your guidelines is not only federal specific, but also local condition and norms, because again, what happens over in the US is totally different on international soil. So if a company operates both in the US and on international soil, that level of communication is going to be different from what happens in the US because of cultural norms, locality, and the conditions. So it's so important. Just like if it operates overseas internationally, you're going to have a handbook for US and you're going to have a handbook that's for international employees, because they do totally things different. And for those of us that know this, we're already behind the 8 ball on a lot of things, because what happens over the EU, the United Kingdom, they're doing things so differently than what we do over here in the US. And sometimes we can be behind the 8 ball. But when we talk about communication and making sure that those total rewards is aligned with both locality as well as federal, state, and local laws, it has to be applicable to, and it's going to be different for a company that operates on international soil. It's going to be different because overseas they require a little bit more than what's required by law for us over here in the US. All right, so let's pause there. What questions do you have? I know total rewards is kind of boring. Still good stuff though. What questions do you have? What questions do you have? You need to take a break, or you want me to keep going? Because here's the thought. I got probably maybe 6 or 7 more slides. And then we have 3 questions. And so I can keep going through it, powering through, and you can ask questions as needed. And I can get you out of here early, or we can take a longer break. It's all up to you. I want to do whatever makes you all comfortable. I think some of you probably want some of your time back. Yeah.
I'm good for you to keep going.
Okay. Christine, your thoughts? Cool. Okay. All right. We'll keep going, and I'll get you out of here probably close to the 8. So let's talk a little bit about legal compliance real quick. Okay. Everything we do in HR, we have to make sure that we are legally compliant. Okay. I always tell people I'm not an attorney. I'm not, but I know enough of the law to be dangerous, right? And so when you talk about legal compliance, even as an HR generalist, there was a lot of things that even though I understood, I still had to partner. Even as I got higher up and moved up the corporate ladder, legal compliance is so important, because in this culture and climate, we want to make sure that as HR professionals that we do not put our company, in any type of legal issues, challenges where they have to litigate. So we just want to make sure that even our policies and our procedures and everything that we do, we are consistent, that we are fair, and that we are operating legally compliant. So we understand that we have different types of laws. They're going to be industry specific regulations. Again, an example of union versus non-union, operating in the US versus operating internationally, just making sure that you are legally compliant. One thing that I will always say to you all is that if you do not know, it's okay to not know. It's better that you ask than to make a decision that's going to cost your company, to be in legal trouble. So always side on the side of caution. If you don't understand something, or you don't understand why this law is applicable, or if you're tasked with redoing your handbook and you also operate internationally, making sure that you partner with your legal counsel or someone that can guide you through and understanding the legal complexities of the industry that you operate in. So this is a slide that's missing little information. So I would encourage you to write down, study legal compliance complexities. That way you can study that on your own because it's missing information. So let's talk a little bit about finance and accounting knowledge real quick. A little bit about that. So we want to make sure partnering with finance colleagues is always helpful, as well as consulting finance for non-finance professional resources, understanding key terms, as an HR person. Again, I've never been an accounting type of finance person. I just knew enough to be dangerous and enough to do my job effectively, right? But this is where you rely on your coworkers and your colleagues, understanding payroll basics. Again, you never mess with an employee's payroll. You never mess up an employee's payroll. You never forget to pay them. You never forget to make sure that they have additional money coming out. These are all things that are essential to understanding finance and accounting knowledge as it relates to you as an HR person. So whether you're a specialist or a generalist, just understanding basic knowledge, understanding the basic compliance when it comes to finance, accounting, and the legal ramifications of the work that we do, right? It's so important that we understand that as HR professionals. We have to make sure that we are payroll considerate. Like, this is one of the biggest things that HR people always have to be mindful, is that we have to make sure that we're efficient, that we're effective, that we're compliant, making sure that we are making sure that we're delivering internally, externally, whether we're having to outsource it, making sure we're checking, making sure everyone's getting paid. If you have a new hire and you promised them that they were going to get paid on a certain Friday, double checking with payroll or your payroll person to make sure that you are both effectively following through on that, because again, all you have is your word, right? And your word means volumes in today's culture and climate, where we live in a world where people are just not honest, right? So as HR professionals, we have to make sure that we are always efficient, effective, and compliant. And of course, payroll is closely related to many HR activities. And so, making sure that that's done appropriately. So let's talk about compensation design real quick. Now, might want to note this slide. You might want to note this slide. So what does it look like when we talk about compensation system design? It consists of job analysis, job documentation, job evaluation, and pay structure. Job analysis, identifying the job and tasks and qualifications for that job. Job documentation, you then create a job description and specification. So if I was tasked with this within an organization and I had to come up with the different jobs, let's say, it's a new position or new positions, or I'm having to deal with compensation. So again, first know your strengths and weaknesses. Compensation was never my strong suit. I'm good at everything else except compensation, meaning this thing right here that we're talking about. This thing right here. I can write job descriptions. I can do employee relations. I can write handbooks. I can do strategy. I can do execution. I can implement an HRIS system. I've done all of that. I don't fool with compensation. I say that to say this: know your strengths and weaknesses when it comes to HR. Okay. I know the basics of compensation. I know enough to be dangerous, but I had to rely on colleagues, consultants, and SHRM calling them to say, wait a minute, I understand the basics, but how do I get through this? So first, I want to say to you, if it's an area of HR that you struggle with, still embrace it, but know when to reach out for help. But if anybody had to come up with a compensation design, this is how you would do it. You first have to identify the tasks and qualifications of that specific job, because we know that jobs have job families. And then we know within them job families, we have different levels. So again, an example would be an engineer. An engineer falls under the engineering department. But within that engineering job title, there may be engineering 1, 2, and 3. Within that engineering 1, 2, and 3, all three of them are going to have different levels with different qualifications, with different pay sliding scales. You get where I'm going? Compensation design. So you will have many different positions that fall under job families, and a company will have to come up with the compensation design to plug and play engineering 1, engineering 2, engineering 3. Engineering 1 is going to have certain qualifications. Engineering 2 is going to have certain qualifications. Engineering 3 is going to have certain qualifications. And then you're going to have to evaluate all three of those positions, 1, 2, and 3, to establish what is the value of that job. And then you then have to establish pay grade and ranges. Hated this part. This is something that I'm not strong at, but I understood the basics. So what am I saying? You have to study for your exam. You should understand the basic compensation design. And it starts with the job analysis, looking at all the jobs, documenting the jobs, what goes into doing that job. Then you have to evaluate that job. And then you have to establish some pay grades and pay scales to that job. Again, that example would be your company just created a new position. If you don't have a blueprint or the information isn't saved, this is the process you would go through. Let's say your company just decided to create a whole new department. It's never done it before. You don't even have any job descriptions you can reference. One, you understand the basics. I gotta analyze the job. How many the job positions is going to be? 15. That's a lot. You got to analyze every 15. You got to create job descriptions, which again, SHRM got templates for you to do that. Okay. They got over 1,000 templates. So that's the easy part. You have to establish that job within the organization. How is it going to fall? How are we going to grade it? How is it going to be rated? That's probably where you have to reach out to a consultant. And then you have to establish pay grades. Okay. Is it going to be competitive? Are we going to lead, lag, match, or lead, lag the industry? This is why I don't fool with compensation. It's too much. But there are people that are excellent at this, right? But if you had to do this, this is where you would start, okay? Looking at that job description, again, writing that job description, what's essential for that job. Again, if we go back to my example, your department, your organization, have you create a whole new department, 15 positions, right? You have to first understand what are the KSAs for that job? Who is the positions going to report to? Is these 15 positions, of those 15 positions, is there a manager? Is there a director? Are there entry level? Are they exempt? Are they non-exempt? Like, these are all things that go into that, right? When you're looking at this whole design, looking at job specification, you know, what is the minimum specifications to perform the job of these 15 jobs, okay? What job families these 15 jobs are going to fall under? What are going to be the competencies of this job, you know, including the KSAs, you know, is it going to be part of a compensation model? I mean, a competency model, or is it going to be a standalone model? Like, what are the elements of this, right? And then you have to be able to determine the value and the price. 15 jobs. 5 of them are management. What level of management? Okay. Are they exempt or non-exempt? Okay. What are the qualifications? What is it that how are we going to pay them? Right. This is how you actually design all of your compensation, and you be able to then plug and play what levels of the organization based off of because you'll literally have to create an organizational chart for just that department, just to kind of look at it in a snapshot. Who's going to report to who? Who's reporting up to who? Is it going to be functional? Is this a matrix type of thing? How many managers, how many people are going to be reporting to who? What is the salaries? What is the pay grade for this? What level is level 1, 2, and 3? What are the total rewards? Because why is this important? Because if it's a new department, that means you're going to have to go out and recruit new talent. And the first thing a candidate want to know is, what am I going to make? How is this all going to stack up against your competitors, right? And then making sure that you intertwine your pay equity when it comes to concerns. So when we talk about looking at job content-based job evaluation, it definitely determines the relative worth of the pay structure, the different jobs, the assessments, their content, and the relationship to those jobs. So it may be non-quantitative, it may be job ranking, job qualification, or it may be based off of a point factor system. Again, we're looking at how do you evaluate these 15 jobs of this example we came up with. It may be one or the other. It may be non-quantitative or quantitative. It just all depends on the organization. And then being able to look at the market-based job evaluation. Again, that determines, again, what is the market pricing? Again, what is this position? Okay, you're creating 15 new jobs, excuse me, a whole department. You're creating 15 jobs, right? It's a new department, sales department, whatever, and now you got 15 people. What's the market pricing? What is your competitors doing? How do you find, what is the analysis? How are you going to slot these positions? Include survey formats, being able to look at the relationship of these jobs. Is if of these 15 jobs, does one or two of them kind of share the same family, meaning kind of mirror one another, but they're different titles with different pay grades? Like, what does this look like? Again, being able to evaluate those jobs based off of market benchmarking. And then looking at both internal and external surveys to try to look at what are the wages when it comes to market compensation and best practices. Again, there are companies out there already doing what your company is doing. You just have to find them, right? And that's where SHRM comes in at, calling that national number, being very specific. I just love them. They are just awesome. Over the 18 years I've been doing HR, I still call them. Matter of fact, I'll be calling them next week for a question because I'm like, okay, I can't even figure this one out for myself. This is the beauty of having resources, but understanding that they're there to help you, but then looking at surveys, external surveys, what is the expertise that's going to go into that? What are the best practices that we need to adopt for an organization? And then determining what type of surveys will be used in an organization, because you can just about survey and benchmark just about anything, believe it or not. But the goal is, okay, what's the end goal? What's the end result? Right. So you just don't want to be going around surveying your employees just to be surveying them. What's the end result? Right. But surveys is one to basically get the pulse of what your employees are thinking and feeling. So when you talk about looking at global market survey consideration, we want to look at what is the best sources of salary, how much information is available, how frequently does the market change, and does that data for jobs available match the ones being compared? So going back to my example of these 15 jobs, we're creating this department, right? We have to be able to look at what data is available to us and how are our positions going to stack up against global market trends as well as trends here in the US. Again, once you have all these positions created, right, now you got to create a pay schedule. You got to establish pay grades, right? You got to group them together according to the same worth within the organization, pay the same rate within the same pay range. The only reason why this stuff would not be applicable is if you talk about bargaining agreements. Those of you that work in union or have worked in union and non-union, you know that this is something totally different. So this applies if this is not bargaining agreements. Okay, they are a whole nother world. But if we're just talking about every day looking at pay structures, setting pay ranges, this is how you do it, right? And you be able to look at individuals and look at the 15 jobs. Where do they fall within the grade? What is the market data according to these jobs? And then how do you determine a midpoint? Because every job position has a minimum, a median, and a maximum. And that's what we're talking about when you're sliding them into slots, looking at what's the minimum that we're going to pay this particular position, what's the median, the person get a raise, right? And what's the maximum? That's why you'll hear some jobs say, you know what, you're already maxed out for this job grade. And some people like, well, dang, I've gotten all the raises. What am I supposed to do? I don't get any more raises. Depending on how that job was structured, if you've been there for 20, 30 years, or you've been there a short amount of time and you moved up that ladder in terms of that pay schedule, there's a very good chance you may be maxed out, right? So now a person, an individual have to decide, okay, what do I do? That means I'm never going to get another raise. I started at the median. They brought me in at the highest they could based off of my education. 5 years later, I'm already at the max. I'm maxed out. I ain't gonna get another raise. What happens? This is why this stuff is important, okay? And you have to also communicate that to employees if they're within an organization. So looking at comp ratios, okay, this is basically where you divide the pay rate of an employee by the midpoint range. So given a range of $16 to $20 an hour, the midpoint will be 18. And the salary of a $16 an hour is the comp ratio. So $16 divided by 18 is 0.89 or 89%. And so that means the comp ratio is one, mean the wages below the midpoint. And again, this is how you determine these wages when it comes to those job families and all of those 15 jobs that I gave an example. You have to be able to tie a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum when you're trying to rank those positions in terms of salary. Broad banding. Companies do broad banding as well. Okay, this is where they combine salaries, grades to create a larger range. Okay, so again, to try to prevent somebody from maxing out, companies will do broad banding when it comes to ranges. And this will allow people to move within their job without outgrowing that pay scale. So going back to that same person, like, okay, wait a minute, I've been here 5 years. You brought me in at the midpoint. Okay, it's 5 years, I'm already maxed out. Well, what do? We're going to broadband. We're going to make sure that we broadband our jobs so that a person can move within that same without outgrowing the pay scale. But having too many grades with a small midpoint differences can cause a problem as well. And so again, that's why I tell my mentees that interview, you give a company a range. Don't give them a small window. And they're like, what do you mean by that, Shay? When they ask you, what is your salary? Because there's a difference between requirement and desire. There's a big difference, right? We can attest to that. So you give them a broad range. So that's the same thing with companies. Some companies, the good HR people, they say, okay, well, give us a range. Give us a range that you're interested in. It's because they probably have done broadbanding and they have a large scale that they can kind of choose from in terms of that salary. And you don't want to isolate yourself either and talk yourself out of money. Talk about broadbanding advantages and disadvantages. So here are some of the advantages of broadbanding, okay? Wider ranges, reduce the number of grades, supports a delayering, enhances employee mobility. So an employee can kind of move throughout that whole job family without maxing out, basically. And then the disadvantages is that it affords less control. Sometimes it will create a perception of equity, sometimes reduce the opportunity of promotion to disadvantage, and it can lead to divergence from the market. So again, it's a hit and miss when you talk about broadbanding your positions within your organization. So now let's talk about wage and hour law compliance. Okay, this is all going to be derivative of where your company operates, both locally on U.S. soil and international soil. But wage and hour law, because we know that California just increased their hourly pay, minimum wage. Okay, here in Indiana, we still haven't seen that happen, right? I think it hasn't been raised in years. But again, we have to make sure that we're compliant when it comes to overtime, holiday pay, equal pay, exemption, caps on hours, cap of hours worked, special issues under local law, and taxation. So this is all, again, looking at the wage and hour law compliance. And then the base pay systems, okay, single rate, flat rate, or home-based step rate. Okay, these again, we're just talking about pay systems. The single flat rate is basically when an employee receives the same rate, okay, generally corresponds to the target market, okay, and looking at the step-based rate is based on longevity. So if I had to study this with you all and I got a question on base pay systems, I first need to understand what is the difference between single rate, flat rate, or time-based. And how I would study this and remember this is that time-based step rate is longevity. That's the short of it. Time-based step rate is longevity. It's based off of longevity. Single or flat rate is basically an employee receives the same rate of pay regardless of performance or seniority. That's how I would remember this. So if I got asked a question, I first have to understand these two. Single base step rate is longevity. Single rate or flat rate means the person gets the same rate of pay regardless of how long they've been there. You've been there 30 years. You've been there 30 days. You are probably a single rate or flat rate. That's how I remember that if I was studying this. Let's talk about performance pay or pay for performance, or PFP. Okay, we know when we look at the word performance, you all, we know that's linked to measures of work. So that's an easy one to remember. Okay, performance-based or merit is linked to the measures of the work of quality. Okay, product-based, we know productivity-based, based on output. That's how I would remember that one. Productivity-based, based on output. Person-based makes me think of an employee. Person-based is affected by employees' knowledge, skill, or competencies. So person-based, KSAs. That's how I would look at that. Knowledge, skill, competencies. Okay. Again, you're looking for ways that you can remember these terms without overloading your brain. Finding acronyms or phrases that can help you remember. And then looking at, last but not least, let's look at some pay adjustments. Okay, we got pay adjustment matrix, general pay increases, lump sums, COLA, seniority, and market-based increases. Okay, so this one doesn't have anything, as you see. So study differential pay on your own because I don't have any content for you. Let me go back to that so you all can write that down. So time-based and geographic. Okay. And then incentive pay, we know that it's based off of an employee to perform at a higher level. We know how to incentivize employees. I think we all kind of know what that is, that pay for performance. It can be structured. You reward someone is basically incentivized. Incentive pay. There's different types of incentives, individual, group, or organization. Challenges for global organization includes designing and awarding culturally appropriate culturally appropriate incentives and regulatory compliance. So these are different types of incentives. If I was studying with you all, I would know there's 3 types of incentives: individual, group, and organization. That's how I will remember this. An example of individual is commissions, non-cash rewards. An example of a group incentive is like team bonuses, group, team, group. Organizational wide, I would look at it as it's for organization, the entire everybody. That means profit sharing. It makes me think of bonus programs, stock options. That's how I would study this. Types of incentives: individual, group, and organization. The acronym that I would use is GIO, group, individual, organization. Types of executive compensation. We know that executives get a high level of compensation and rewards. They get the salary, stock options, stock purchase plan, restricted stock grants. They get phantom stock, restricted stock, and performance grants, okay? Type of executive compensation. Direct sales compensation. We know that when it comes to compensation, you have a straight salary, you have a salary plus commission and bonus, and you have straight commission. Okay. We're talking about direct sales compensation. Straight salary, salary plus commission or bonus, or straight commission. What are some compensation for outside directors? Retainer, perks, benefits, like life insurance, deferred compensation programs. Again, this is for people that a company hires outside of the organization. What are some pay variations? We all have probably seen this at one time or another in our career. We have the red circle rates, green circle rates, pay compression. I would encourage you to know the difference between this. Red circle is pretty self-explanatory. It kind of says that rates above the range. So red circle is, I tie it to rates above the range. Green circle is below. Pay compression is small differences regardless of a person's experience, skills, or pay seniority. So if I was studying this, pay variations, I know that there's such thing as red, green, and pay, or red, green, and blue. I know red is above the range. I know green is below the range. I know blue is pay compression. That's how I would study this. Okay. And then choosing benefits and perks. Which ones are required by law? Again, if you and your organization are designing or rolling out something new when it comes to compensation, which benefits are required by law in US versus overseas where you operate, which benefits an employer wants to compete for their employees, meaning what is going to draw. What's drawing a lot of employees now is their company is helping them pay back their student loans. They're giving them this virtual work from home. They're kind of giving them a lot of flexibility in terms of a lot of pay time off. So again, what benefits or perks are your company going to use to attract employees, right? When it comes to this whole compensation and total rewards, right? Which benefits do employees offer and prefer? The only way you're going to know that is by surveying your employees. And then which benefits provide a creative choice? Like, what are the options? Is it a la carte? Are they just stuck with this? Do they get to pick and choose? What is it that you're choosing as far as perks to try to retain or attract employees? And then, of course, looking at those variations when it comes to benefits. You know, standardization is difficult because benefits do vary from one aspect to another. So we don't want to get standardized, but we want to at least offer enough to retain and attract. But we don't also want to send ourselves into bankruptcy, right? So we have to make sure that we look at what's applicable to the city and state that we operate in, what's required by federal law, what's required by locality and local laws, what's important and what's important to our employees. Because again, it doesn't matter what type of compensation or total reward you come up with. If it does not appease to your employees, you're wasting your time and your company's money. You want to make sure that you design it that's going to be beneficial to the employees in mind, because again, your best capital, human capital, are your employees. So their opinion is important, right? But then before you even try to figure out that, we got to do a needs assessment. One thing about HR professionals, we can do a needs assessment on just about everything, but you want to review that strategy, review the philosophy, analyze the demographics, be able to analyze benefits, and conduct gap analysis. That is important when you're trying to determine what type of, and this is after you survey, right? Or you can do it before, it depends on the organization. You can do them both simultaneously. You probably want to get that data from your employees, but you want to make sure that you look at what's needed. What's the needs assessment? What are we going to do? What are the type of benefits that we want to offer? Do we want to offer paid time off? Do we want to offer family-oriented benefits such as child care, elder care, domestic partner benefits? What type of health? Is it going to be medical, dental, wellness, employee type of disability, short-term, long-term, permanent? What is it? Depending on some companies like Delta, they fund their own insurance. That's why people don't understand. That's why their flights are high. That's why it's high to fly with Delta. But at the end of the day, they literally fund their own benefits. They don't use a third-party administrator. They are their benefits. Yeah, Delta funds their own benefits program, and some companies do that. But what are your company going to offer? What type of benefits? That life insurance, right? What's going to happen with that? What's going to attract and retain employees? And then termination and severance, as you see, that part of this slide is missing. So I encourage you to study severance, but understanding terminations, voluntary, involuntary, and then circumstances in which an organization can terminate your employee that is prescribed by law or different from country. Okay. Unemployment insurance, this is something that an employer pays into. Okay, so again, one thing about it is just about every state, just about not all, have that at will portion, but there are some states that are more friendlier when it comes to employees versus, the employer. There are some states that are more lean towards the employer. There are states that lean more towards the employee, but nevertheless, unemployment insurance is something that an employee has paid into, and it's something that's available to them whether they've been terminated or fired. And of course, some organizations want to fight people on unemployment. I don't have an opinion about that one way or another. Just know that they paid into it, and we actually, as an organization, you have to pay into it as an employer. I think it's $7,000 up to the first $7,000 of an employee's salary when they're first hired, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I think that may be accurate. And then also looking at retirement plans, this is another benefit. Are you offering defined benefit plan, defined contribution? What does that look like? Is an employee vested after 5 years, after 7 years, after a year? How are these benefits? What's the risk that's taken? Like, all of these things are important. Again, we're talking about attracting and retain an employee. This is one of the benefits that's going to do that. And then making sure that there is a fiduciary responsibility, when it comes to the legal ramifications, making sure that there's an obligation that employees know what they're investing in, knowing and having the 401k rep or someone that they can call if you don't know the answer as an HR person, but just making sure that we are being fiduciary responsible when it comes to our employees, their retirement. Social Security is another one. Someone that's getting ready to retire, they're going to have questions like, okay, when does my last paycheck, my payout, my 401, like, they're going to have all these questions because it's a benefit, and you have to be able to adhere to that and answer those questions. But if you don't know the answer, that's okay too. Know where to find the answer, right? Just know where to find the answer. And then being able to look at these other perks. Again, what are you offering in terms of benefits? Mobile devices, what are you offering? Education fees, training program, professional development, club memberships, certifications, like you all getting the certification now. Again, these are all perks, and it's going to vary by country and by culture. And then, of course, looking at these common benefit metrics, what is the cost of these benefits per employee? And then what is it going to be the expense? What portion is the employee going to pay? What portion is the organization going to pay? These are all the things that you take into account when you are looking at your total strategy in terms of total rewards. Of course, looking at again, these are benefit metrics that a benefits person or your benefits department looks at, which is all part of HR. They look at all these things, what's the insurance participation? What percentage of people are out on FMLA? What percentage of people are taking time off? What percentage of people are being treated for cancer or diabetes? Like, these are all things that we all have access to, right? And all of these things we look at, not in a bad way. It's just you want to know, based off of representation, what group of individuals and what portion is the company paying as it relates to these different type of healthcare costs or dental costs and things of that sort. So I'm gonna pause there. We got 3 questions, and that's it. Ooh, we're done. What questions do you have for me?
Have you had a drink?
I'm drinking. I know, right?
I haven't seen you take a drink, and you just keep going and going and going and going.
Like the Energizer Bunny. Like the Energizer Bunny. Yes, let me take a drink while I ask you if y'all have any other questions before we do our last 3 questions, and then we will be out of here in 5 minutes. Okay. I drink a lot of water. How are you all feeling? How are you all doing? Good? Okay. we're gonna do these questions, and then I'll tell you my little story real quick, and I'll get you out of here. So oh God, this is a long question. Okay. Let me get my answers. A company has struggled to reach revenue projections for several consecutive quarters. It has avoided a reduction in force to the point senior leadership believes that the primary reason for the recent struggles can be traced back to understaffing across the organization, leading to employees being overworked and unable to reliably complete necessary tasks. Which pay strategy would best serve the organization as it creates new positions to help augment the current staff and address the revenue issue? I don't know about you, I'm overwhelmed right now. That's a lot. You know I got a sense of humor, Donna. This question,
I love it.
this question is doing so much right now, but let's read it again. A company has struggled to reach revenue projections for several consecutive quarters. It has avoided a reduction in force, a RIF, to this point, but senior leaders believe that the primary reason for the recent struggles can be traced back to understaffing across the organization, leading to employees being overworked and unable to reliably complete necessary tasks. Which strategy would be best? Which pay strategy would be best serve the organization as it creates new positions to help augment the current staff and address the revenue issue? Tell me, what do we know to be true? What is this question asking us?
Well, they're not doing financially well, and they haven't been for quite some time, so they're not going to have just unlimited financial resources.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's what we know to be true. And the question they're asking us, for me, if I was taking this exam, I read all that other stuff. It's a whole lot. It's doing a whole lot. But what they're asking me is the last part of the question. Which pay strategy? So what we know to be true is we're looking for a pay strategy. That's the question of this question. All this other stuff is fine. It's fluff. It's to try to distract you. The question is, which pay strategy would best serve the organization? That's where I would stop at. That's where I did stop at. After I read it twice during the exam, they're asking me for a pay strategy. They're asking me which one will be best to address the current staff and address the revenue issue because they're creating new positions. So which two can we eliminate?
Lead lags one.
Lead lag?
Because it does not, because normally in a lead lag, you're leading in the first part of the quarter or first quarters, and then you're lagging in the second, and it's not telling you where they hit on that. So lead lags one.
You're listening to my facilitation. That's right. We can eliminate that. That's exactly what lead lag is. What's match the market? Do we want to match the market? Remember,
I'm leaning to match because I'm also going on to help augmenting. So you're going to augment and keep to what you currently have and just kind of add to that.
okay.
That's where I was going, but
Okay. Who else say match the market? Lead the market?
I
Somebody
was
else?
thinking match as well.
Thinking match? Okay.
I was
Christine
thinking
or Donna?
lead. I was just thinking lead because if they need to get people in there pretty quickly
Okay.
to get their staff going, they need to lead the pay.
Okay.
I don't know, but yet they don't have any money, so I don't know.
There we see, right. See, so that goes to we go right to our HR hat, right? We got to stick with sure think. I know, right?
Oh,
It's
Lordy.
Christine, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking match because they don't have the funding and resources to lead the market.
Okay. The answer is lag.
Oh, really?
I know, and I don't have my facilitator book to explain why. Make a note to self to see if Patrick can find that as to why that answer is, because we have a whole facilitator that breaks down why they chose that answer. The answer is actually lag the market. Lag market competition. The only thing I can think of is the fact that we know lagging is kind of behind the scenes. And because we all know that they're already in trouble, we don't want to lead the market, which means that'll bust our salaries and wages through the roof. So we know we don't want to do that because that's the two biggest expenses, right? We don't want to match it because that's going to require us to probably bring our employees, that means all of our employees, up to the matching benchmark of the industry. Well, we don't have money, so I don't want to do that. We don't want to lead the lag because we know that we're going to have to lead in the beginning of the fiscal year and then lag at the end. Well, we don't want to pee people off, right? So for me, lag the market, which means, hey, I'll bring them in, right? Because I basically need to get some people in here to help my staff. Bring some people in. I'll bring them in lagging. And then once I can look at the organization compensation philosophy, then maybe I can bring everyone up to match the market. But right now, I don't want to bring them in matching the market, and I don't want to bring them in leading the market because I'm going to pee off my employees, my current ones. I'm bringing in new people, and I'm going to give them more than what my employees are making. That's the quickest way.
They're already overworked. Yeah.
And they're already overworked. So do you want to see a whole department quit on you? No. So you bring them in lagging the market only to then go ahead and capitalize and bring everyone up to market when you can. So I can see why they chose lag the market. Okay, cool. Let's do this.
So I
next.
think the key in that question then is also you need to hone in on they're talking it as being traced back to understaffing of the organization.
Yep, because that's exactly what it says. It says, as it creates new positions to augment the current staff and address the revenue issue. Yep. And so even though the question do be mostly important, you can see why I can get you tripped up to your point, Lori, because it wants you to focus all this other stuff, but it does always tie into the final result. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, these questions on the exam just used to make my head hurt. I'm like, really? This is doing too much. All right, let's move to the next one. A small organization with a single HR specialist wants to conduct a job evaluation to assist with updates to the compensation program. Which form of job evaluation is the best choice for the organization? Small organization with a single HR specialist wants to conduct a job evaluation to assist with updates to the compensation program. Which form of job evaluation is the best choice for the organization? What do we know to be true?
I think we can take B out because that's very time consuming and this is a single HR specialist.
I agree. That one can go. Which other one can go? So we said B can go. And what else? Small organization, HR specialist. She wants to conduct a job evaluation to help her determine what type of compensation program to go with. Which form of job evaluation is the best? Sherm think they're asking you, what is the best answer? There may be a close enough answer, but they want the best answer in this scenario. Not what you and I would do in our everyday jobs, but what are they asking us? They're saying, what is the best solution? The best answer?
I don't think you'd want to job classify.
You're right. We can eliminate that one. Do we know what job classification is?
Isn't that putting them all together?
Trying to classify the jobs?
The ones that are similar?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we don't want to do A and we don't want to do B. So that leaves us two options. She's needed to conduct a job evaluation. Job evaluation to assist with compensation program. Would she be benchmarking it?
I don't think it'd be benchmarking.
It's job ranking. She's going to job rank them, then she's going to benchmark them.
Benchmark. Yeah, I was going to say, I thought benchmarking came later, but.
You're right. So the answer to this one is she's going to job rank them. The question is asking, hey, listen, she's an HR specialist. She wants to do updates to the job program, to the compensation program. Before she can update the compensation philosophy, the program, she first have to understand every job evaluation and job rank them, and then tie pay scales to it, and then benchmark it.
Yeah.
She got to first put them in job ranking. She got to first put them in job ranking. Okay. So the answer is D. Last one. Which compensation system is best suited to compensate direct salespeople who are only asked to secure sales but do not have responsibilities associated with servicing customers? Which compensation system is best suited to compensate direct salespeople who are only asked to secure sales, but they don't have any responsibilities in servicing customers? So what do we know to be true? What are they looking for in this question?
Securing sales is key.
That's part of it. What's another one? They're looking at the compensation system. Remember, we talked about this during today, that there's different levels: straight pay, compensation with bonuses. If we know that to be true, there's already two that we can get rid of right now. If we look at what compensation is, we have direct pay, we have individual, we have group, we
I
have
think you get rid of A and D. I'm sorry, I totally just interrupted you, Shay. I'm sorry.
no, I'm looking at the answers. No, you're good. A can go and D can go.
Good.
What I want us to focus on is that they're asking us a compensation system.
I'd say B, commission and bonus
That's the answer.
based on sales. Yeah.
That's
I
the
said,
answer. Salary
it
plus
is?
commission. It's good. It's okay. Again, it's that SHRM thing. Again, they're asking us what type of compensation system. We first have to understand which ones are out there, right? And we kind of went through that today, but just know it. Okay, they're trying to say, okay, listen, the salespeople have they're direct salespeople, but they don't service customers.
So why wouldn't they just get commission, I wonder? I just need to go back and read something.
Yeah, well, make a note to ask Patrick to give you the explanation, because that's the thing about this. They give us a breakdown why they chose it. See,
Yeah.
that's why I wish I had up the platform that you all use, that we actually go through questions. That's what I did last semester.
Yeah. I'm gonna
So
ask
I don't
them.
have the breakdown in front of you, because when you answer the questions, wrong in the SHRM platform, it tells you why they chose that answer. I wish we had that. So I do apologize, but make a note to find out why they chose that. But the correct answer is B, salary plus commission and bonus.
Okay.
What we know to be true is that they're asking us what type of compensation are we going to pay our direct salespeople that do not have any responsibility or any interaction with servicing customers. So basically, they're just direct salespeople, but they don't deal with customers. So it sounds like that most companies have direct salespeople. They're salary plus bonus. They're basically going out there getting the sales and the accounts. So think of them as an account manager. They're not dealing with customers, but they're out here getting accounts, salary plus commission. So I can see it.
I see it too. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So I'm gonna stop sharing real quick. You hang with me 2 minutes. I'll give you some feedback here as to, let me see, what actually happened. So one thing, what questions do you have for me before I go into that? What questions thus far? What can I do differently for next week? Because I'm with you next week too.
I loved it.
Good.
Good.
Thank you. Awesome. I'm glad it was helpful. Definitely fill out the survey. Let them know your feedback. We'll be back together again next week, but just real short. Okay. Don't be afraid. Okay. This doesn't happen often. Okay. So I scheduled my exam. I scheduled to take both of them. My company paid for one, and I paid for the other. It was during 2019. I'm trying to think, 2019. It was before the pandemic. I paid for the SHRM SCP, and my company paid for the SHRM CP. I had been studying with my study group. My SHRM CP, the SHRMs, the senior one was I was scheduled to take it right after Christmas. A week before, about a week and a half before my exam, I got hit with the flu. And it wasn't a small feat. It was the type of flu that was just, I couldn't even get out of bed. One of my closest girlfriends had to come over and help me. I was that weak. So I missed the exam. I missed it. But blessingly enough, I had also scheduled the SHRM CP. That one was scheduled, and I scheduled these at the same time, by the way. Like I scheduled the SCP because my thought of it was, hey, if I pass one and don't fail the other, at least I walk away with something. That was my approach. But my company only paid for one. So that was my approach. Hey, I'll take them both. And if I pass them both, great. If I fail one and pass the other, still great. Okay. Well, I got sick, couldn't get out of bed. Actually did not get better until after New Year's. Like got my strength back, felt like moving around, all of that. So the next one was scheduled for February. So I'm like, gosh, I missed this. So now I got to keep studying to keep the information in front of me for another month. So by this time, some people in my study group had passed. One had taken it, didn't do so well. I think she said she missed it by like 5 or 6 points, something like that. My second one was scheduled for February. So mine was scheduled 2 days before the window closes. So I get to, I don't know where you all are, but I live Northwest, but I went to the one in Castleton. Even though there's one right around the corner for me on 96 and Meridian, I didn't want to go to that one. I wanted to go like out. And that's the only place I could schedule it. So I ended up out here by Allisonville Road, towards Castleton Mall and stuff. So it was 2 days before the window was supposed to, the window to take it. I got in there. The first thing I did is one, I didn't drink any coffee because I knew it would send me to the bathroom, even though, you know, I'm a coffee drinker from time to time. I got a good night's sleep. I ate a banana because banana can help with potassium. If you're a person that get tired from sitting, for me, a banana helped with me keep my energy. I didn't eat nothing heavy. I didn't drink any, you know, red wine or anything because I like wine from time to time. I didn't drink any of that the night before. I got a good night's sleep. I woke up, I took a nice little brisk walk, didn't do nothing crazy, didn't lift weights or nothing, just gotta kind of relieve myself because I think my exam was scheduled for like 11 or 12 or something. It was like later on in the afternoon. It wasn't early in the morning. So I got a nice little brisk walk in, even though it's a little nippy outside. I ate a banana. I drank enough water to be hydrated, not enough to keep me running to the bathroom. I got there early. They wouldn't let me take anything else. They made me take off my Apple Watch, all of that, put it in a locker. I'm like, okay. I got in there and the room was full. There were so many people in there. Different people taking exams. And it wasn't HR stuff. Real estate, all types of people. I get in there, I sit down, she signs me in, I take a deep breath, and I'm like, okay, at this point, like my mentor said, I'm either gonna know it or I don't know it. I'm either gonna sink or swim at this point. I felt confident enough. I knew that if I didn't know the answer, I would mark it and come back to it. So that was that. I got halfway through the exam, about 2.5 hours. The computer freezes up. It started doing this right here. I look around. I take the headset because, you know, you can put headphones on to kind of drown out the noise. Because, you know, people in there taking different exams. I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, is this just me? And I'm like, this is not happening. And it just kept thinking. It kept turning. It kept turning. Finally, I'm sitting here. I push back in my seat and I'm looking around like, this is not happening right now. Like, I'm about to literally like come unhinged at this point. Well, I didn't have to. A young man stands up and he screams, "What the?" He was there taking his medical exam. So then all the computers just started crashing. People jumping up, what's going on? What? It was like mayhem, you all. People standing up, and I'm like, okay, this isn't just me. But at the end of the day, I don't really care about nobody else. I'm almost done with this exam. I think I was close to like question 100. I mean, I was almost done, you all. I felt good about where I was doing. People are standing up freaking out. Now the what is it, the little the people that monitor you and come in, they're like, everybody stay calm, stay calm. These, I didn't know at the time, medical students were losing. They came unhinged. The one started pacing the floor and was like, I've been studying and this is a 3-day exam and you all better fix it and get it back up and it better take me back. I mean, when I say he came unhinged, I'm about to cry though. I'm so mad, I'm about to cry, okay? What is happening? This is not happening. So I jump on the phone with Mom. I'm like, Mom, you won't believe what happened. Long story, like she can help.
Like, I can't help you.
Right, she in a whole nother city and state. I'm about to live in Chicago. She's like, what's going on? Calm down, calm down. I'm like, I can't calm down. came unglued. Okay. By this time, they're like, hey, okay, we're having an outage or something. And they was like, I mean, when I said people came unhinged, long story short, it did not come back up.
Oh,
By this time, after I calmed down and cried, I then jumped on the phone with SHRM National. I called them. As they were trying to figure out why the systems went down, you got the medical students, you had 2 girls that was taking the real estate exam. There was people in there like me. There was like 1 other girl that was taking her SHRM exam. There was other people in there taking exams to many people. When I say this room was jam packed, the computer systems went completely down. I'm on the phone with SHRM. I'm trying to explain to them, and the IT guy, they finally connected me to somebody. And I mean, I'm freaking out. I'm like, hi, my name is, my voice shaking. I'm in the middle of my exam. I don't know what to do. What does this mean? What does this mean? Got through to a guy, and he said, take a deep breath. He says, because what I'm about to tell you, you're probably not gonna like. I took a deep breath, and he says, well, here's the thing. He says the window closes in 2 days. There's no other openings to take the exam. He says, but once we can verify, not that I don't believe you, once we can verify that the systems went down, he says, I'll create a ticket and you can go back to that same facility. You're just gonna have to take it over again.
ugh. Yuck.
I said, what? He said, you're gonna have to take it over again. I said, there's no way for you to put me right back to where I was, in questions where the computer shut down. He says, no. He says, here's the thing about the exams. He said, to prevent fraud and to prevent fraudulent activity, he says, every person is given a different exam. Every time a person take it, they're given a different exam. He said, we pick from over, I think he said over 1,000 or 100,000 questions. I can't remember if it was 1,000 or 100,000 questions, but every exam is uniquely to a person taking it. So if a person has taken it 2 or 3 times, they're going to get a different exam. And he says, we pick from a variety of questions, and that's how the questions are compiled. He says, so I'm going to put in a ticket that you can go take it, whether it's past the window or not. The window closes in 2 days. You can go take the exam again when you're ready. He says, I'm really sorry. He says, but that's all that we can do. We can't have the system pull it back up for you to finish where you started. So anyway, they finally got the computer and stuff back on a few hours later. Didn't do anything for me. I was still there because there was some of us in the hallway sitting on the floor just crying. I mean, when I say you all, there were people in there that was taking different exams. Like I said, those medical students, I did not know that their exams were 3 days. That's how I found out they take 3-day exams. I had no clue.
That's
Couple-
terrible.
Yeah, them 2 medical students came unglued. They were unhinged, and I don't blame them, right? So that's what happened. So then I went back a week later. I had to literally gather myself and like process it. It was past the window, but he had put in that ticket. So I went back, and that's when I took it and passed it. So
You deserve to pass it after all that.
telling you, I went through all of that. Yeah, I was upset. But again, I was determined. My point of telling you that is that along the way, I had every opportunity to be discouraged. This is what I'm sharing with you all. I'm very practical. I am a down-to-earth person, and my life is not absent of problems, challenges, and issues. I had every opportunity to say, forget it. But I made up in my mind that no matter how hard the studying was, no matter how many times I got the questions wrong, I refused to give up against all odds. And that is the best advice I can give you. It's never going to be the right time for you to take this class, take the exam, pass the exam, get another certification if you choose, go back to school. It's never going to be the right time. You just have to come to the resolve that this is what you want, and then you begin to balance your life around that. So I was just determined. Me and my classmates, study group, we literally spent 6 months giving up our weekends, not every weekend, but we gave it up. And if we didn't meet in person, we did Zoom. I mean, we met every week, just not always in person. We were determined, and so you have to really come to that resolve. And so that's the best advice. But once I got there and I passed it, I was just like, finally, it was worth it. Because I get to, sit on the board as I did, like Patrick, and then I get to come back and spend time with great people like you. So it was well worth it. But yeah, that's my horror story. Okay, that's what happens. You got hit with the flu once, and then the system wanted to crash. But here's the thing, had I not paid for both, I probably wouldn't have even been able to take it because again, those windows fill up fast. That's why you need to schedule. And that's another thing real quick. I scheduled mine right after. I don't know if I scheduled, I can't remember. It's been over 5 years now. I don't know if I scheduled it right before my SHRM class ended like you all, or yes, I think I scheduled it a week before the class ended or a week after the class ended. I made sure because that to me was my target. I'm like, okay, because here's the thing, if you put it off, you'll put it off. You know what I mean? For me, I'm a person that's driven by structure. So I made the appointment because I had something to look forward to. And everything else had to just kind of fall in line. You know what I mean? So I encourage you, do not wait to schedule it. Because once this class ends, you're going to be exhausted from the fact that it was a lot of information and you want to keep the information fresh in your mind. So I encourage you to schedule it, okay? And then let that be your target, your moving target to get it accomplished. So anyway.
I
We
scheduled
scheduled
mine
it-
for the
oh,
day
sorry.
after.
Okay,
Sorry,
say it
Leah.
again. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Whoever was talking, sorry.
No, you go.
I scheduled mine for the day after.
Shoot, when does the class end?
May 8th, 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm in there doing my test.
Oh, I'm
Like,
so excited. Okay,
get
cool,
in
cool.
there. I've got my goal. Get in there.
That's it. Knock it
And-
out. Knock it out.
Well,
Love
it's still fresh in my brain from the night
Yes,
before.
absolutely. How about everybody else? When did you all schedule it? Donna, Christine, Donna?
I haven't scheduled mine yet, but I'm not gonna do it right away because I feel like I need to. There's no time to go backwards, but I have to make time to go back to that competencies book. I
Sure.
just have to.
That's a lot. And that one is a lot. That's a lot. Yeah, try not to wait too long, my friend, but definitely give yourself
Yeah.
at least 30 days, to kind of
Okay.
follow up or what have you. Because my class ended right before Thanksgiving. So if you think about it, that's when I scheduled mine the end of December because I gave myself that 30 days. I'm like you, it was right before Thanksgiving. Or matter of fact, I think ours ended the week of Thanksgiving. I always go home for Thanksgiving. So I went home to Chicago. I did not study, no joke. I'm like, I deserve to take some time off. When I finally finished the classes, when I went like 5 or 6 days without thinking about it. And then one day I got in my old bedroom, pulled up my iPad and kind of just fooled around with a few of the questions just to kind of, but yeah, for the first 4 or 5 days after my class ended, my brain was hurting. Like it was hurting, like for real, right? So, but yeah, but I'm like, okay, 30 days. And that way I can just go ahead and keep it fresh and then I'll take it in 30 days. But then I got hit with the flu. So definitely I encourage that. So any other thoughts or comments before I let you go? This was fun. No questions? Okay. Listen, thank you so much for the privilege of your time. I truly, truly mean that. If you need anything, you can reach out. I think my contact information was on the end of the slide. If not, I will be back with you next Wednesday, same time, same place, and we'll cover a different topic. And yeah, we'll just kind of get through it. Come with questions. If there's anything you think of after tonight, you can shoot me an email or you can wait till next week. Either way, I'm open. I always leave that door open for people like you because I too sat there. So, and even after the class ends, consider me a resource. I do not mind that at all. So thank you so much. Enjoy your evening and I'll see you next week.
All right.
All right. See ya. Thanks.